Right? No, okay, that's Marty,
For them all.
okay, and Corinne,
Hi.
and Susan, our neighbor, she lives down the
Hi, how
street.
are you? How are you? Good, thank
Okay.
you.
And Donna,
Nice to meet you.
and this is the boss,
There'll be a
That's
pop
Rick.
quiz later. I'll take it, I can't remember the name.
Would you like to start the meeting again?
Okay, so we'll start the meeting all over again at 7:05. And we have on the agenda, we have the approval of the agenda, approval of minutes, and 3 items to look at. Approval and forwarding of home occupations types 1 and 2 to the planning board, commercial animal husbandry operations in the residential district, and a continued discussion of family animal husbandry in the residential districts. I need a motion to accept the agenda.
Yay.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those
Yeah.
in favor?
I have one discussion.
Yeah, Marty?
I think our priority should be on the commercial end of our animal husbandry prior to residential, because this will be affecting, just not your possibly cow guys or anything else, but it also is be affecting your, equestrians.
Okay, yeah, that's why it's the
I'm
second.
just saying,
Oh, no, that's why it's the second item on the list.
I'm
So-
just saying, I think we should turn on, primarily, get that so it's forwarded.
I agree, I agree. So, any other discussion? All those in favor?
aye,
I wasn't here for that last meeting, so
Yeah,
shall I
this is for
abstain?
this is for
The
this
agenda.
agenda.
Oh, for this agenda, aye.
Thank you. It is unanimous. The next item is the approval of minutes.
That was the one I was.
I didn't see the minutes.
I didn't either.
I
I copied them in there.
They were there?
Yeah,
Okay.
They were
I
there?
think Tad said it, yeah.
I can't remember, it's the.
March
oh, wait,
21st.
The March 21st.
21st, yes.
April 4th.
You and I were not there.
March
March
7th minutes, they are.
We had a meeting,
We had a meeting after that. We had a meeting on the
There was a
21st.
meeting I didn't get to,
Yeah,
so.
So we don't have minutes.
so we don't have minutes.
Not yet, no.
So
Okay.
we're to postpone
Right.
that.
We'll table those.
We already did March 7th, didn't we?
Yeah, I thought we
Yeah.
had.
No, I think we did.
Okay, excellent.
So we'll table the approval of the March 14th minutes, and we'll move on to the land use ordinance. The first one, did you get,
Oh, no,
these are the revisions that we were looking at. They encompass the occupations 1 and 2.
yeah. I had a couple of questions that were in red on the back. Because I wasn't sure. I had cross-outs, write-ins, cross-outs, write-ins, and I wasn't sure which one it was.
Well, the 20 vehicle trips per day,
I almost want to say that's accurate.
well, the number is right, but we added a phrase associated with the business. So that we
Yeah.
eliminated the family
right,
trips.
Correct.
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what, that was crossed out, and then there was a big arrow on it.
And then it had, did we have hours of operation from 6 A to 11 P?
That was the thing that got
they were-
crossed out several times.
I thought we
What
had
do you-
different hours on that.
Well, you know what, I remember us saying, you know what, this is something that people aren't even supposed to know is there.
No,
Right.
this is type
This is
2
the
though.
type 2, so
Oh,
they're
You
gonna
know,
have
type two,
employees
yeah, you're
outside.
right, okay.
I think that's a long, a big window.
It is a big window,
Seven to-
especially if you
7 to
have
10.
customers coming in.
7 to 10, I would think.
Or I would even be more conservative and make it 9. But if 10 is okay with people,
I mean, 8, well, I say 8 is because,
8 to 8 or something like that, I
well,
mean,
no,
12 hours.
depends on, let's say like, if you have a account, you may have people later at night than, because the people are getting out to meet. So 8 o'clock is,
How about arrivals after or before a certain hour?
I can't.
No, I think just
You can't
hours
enforce
of operation from here to here.
that. 7 to 9.
I agree with you, 7 to 10.
Okay, I'm happy to be overridden.
Marty?
Yeah.
I'll wait till you guys finally make a decision.
I just got
Yeah.
mine tonight,
So-
give them a
We're
12-hour
eliminating
window.
the cross
Oh.
out.
Yeah.
9 to 9, is that what you
Oh,
said?
that's what I would have said, yes, 9 to 9, you've got a 12-hour window.
I think 12
You're,
hours.
you're
is
in a
fine.
residential zone, after 9 o'clock, I think is a little excessive.
I think so too.
Thank you.
But I-
That's why I said 8 to 8.
Well, but this is not limited to a residential zone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the home occupations in
because in
the,
a commercial zone, you don't have to have.
But it would
that
also be
occupation.
in R4, which is not residential, it's rural conservation.
That's true.
okay, good point. I forgot about that side, so what do you wanna do? You wanna say 8 to 10?
I like 7 to 9.
7 to 9?
9 in
Yeah.
the morning to 8.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
Well, 7 in the
Shall we
morning till 9
compromise
at
and
night.
go with 7 to 9?
So I can look at 7 to 9.
All right,
Okay.
let's do that, 7 to 9.
All those in favor of 7 to 9?
Yeah,
Aye.
Yeah, we got that covered. Okay,
So it's finally done.
Well, no, I put
No,
I
wait.
have some
we're
other,
gonna add that
I think
note on the 20 vehicle trips.
it needs clarification on type 1. And what we had discussed, we made it clear that there was no permit required.
Right.
Well, just because it's, that's, they all go around the circle here again. Because it is a permitted use, that automatically means no permit is required, that's inherent in that use.
It says the home occupation should be permitted if it complies with all the requirements of the section. If they decide they're gonna put in a new driveway and stuff like that, that triggers site plan, that's different. But remember, it's not supposed, it's supposed to be innocuous.
Absolutely.
And so, one would assume that you're not gonna do anything to trigger a site plan review. You're not gonna build new
Okay.
parking lots, in other words. That's what.
Basically, the permit simply says that if you come for a permit, if you meet the requirements, you get the permit. If you don't meet the requirements, obviously you can't do something if you don't meet requirements, but you don't have to come before the planning board and ask us for permission.
Well, you never can be planning board with anything.
Well,
Well,
that's true.
type 3, which is yet to.
one other
So
question.
there is,
Go ahead, Donna, sorry.
I'm gonna, start doing something in my home that I'm not gonna tell you about, and I'm not gonna find out later that I was still supposed to come and get a permit.
Not on the type 1.
Okay, as long as that's clear, then, because we had the language in there that no permit was required, but it's not in here.
Well,
As long as it conforms to all
Complies
the
with
other,
requirements.
all the
Yeah.
other,
Alright.
descriptions.
yeah, I mean, what you wrote was a home occupation would be permitted if it complies with all the requirements of the section.
Right.
Which is what it says in
Yeah, yeah.
I, a home occupation shall be
Yeah.
permitted if it complies.
But in the draft that I had, it said at the end, no registration or permitting is required by the town. And that was more to make it clear to the people who are doing it than to us.
Right, I think that's a good idea.
What will usually happen is
Unless there's a complaint, nobody knows.
yeah, and a lot of people come in and ask anyways. Guy came in today and asked me if we can have 2 chickens.
Are there reasons not to put that language in?
Which
I
one?
would leave it out
Why?
myself.
Why?
I think it's redundant, personally.
I'd rather be
Because
redundant
a home
and
occupation
make it more
is
clarified.
permitted if it complies with the requirements of this section. And then actually, it's almost contradictory. A home occupation shall be permitted if it complies with all the requirements of this section, and then you say, you don't have to go apply for a permit. We just said you don't need a permit.
That's what a permitted use is. We're still in a condition, I know the town is still in a conditional use mode in their minds, but permitted, I mean, it's like, somebody goes in, one good example would be, when they went into,
It doesn't matter to me,
Mike's.
I'm just,
They went into Mike's, there was no need for a permit. They didn't have to get a permit from us. When they went into, Vinegar Hill, when they converted Vinegar Hill, they didn't need to get a
Well-
permit from us at all, because it was a permitted use in that district. They had to get a building permit because we were making modifications. They didn't have to get a site plan permit at all, and they have to get a conditional use permit because that use was permitted in that district.
What I'm thinking about is, oftentimes when you use the word shall, it's used in an imperative sense.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think that some people are gonna read that and think, all right, it shall be permitted, suggesting to them that they gotta call you and get a permit,
I-
okay?
Yeah.
So I think
see.
that adding that additional language makes it very clear to everybody, it shall be permitted, and by the way, you don't need to come get one or seek one, period.
It all
I think
depends upon
it's
where
a
you put
difference
the
in the
emphasis.
emphasis.
It
Right.
is, it
Yeah,
is.
It
Yeah,
shall be
you're right, it
permitted
is.
or it shall be
I
permitted.
didn't hear it until you said it out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I think you should add a clause that says, as long as, I mean, if you're gonna be redundant, I think you should also say, it does not need to be permitted, or a permit is not required, as long as you are in compliance of, you know, the rules of this section.
So it should say, a permit is not required as long as the home occupation is in compliance with the requirements of the section.
I hate,
What I just wrote, it says no permit is required. for
Right.
home occupation.
Okay.
Yeah, that would
Does that
clarify
work
it.
better?
Mhm.
Question along the thought, even though it's home occupation, okay, where does it play, if it does play at all, about expanding your home business?
because then you wouldn't be in compliance.
That's right.
You
And
still,
then-
you still can expand, but you're still, because your home business, you're expanding just in your house.
But that was the reason for adding that clause,
I'm
and
just-
that
No,
is,
no, but then, that's as long as you're within the 25% square footage of the house. You can't expand past that point.
as long as you're
Under,
in
under any
compliance.
circumstance,
Well,
you can't go
you-
past that point.
Okay. I'm just throwing it out as a question.
Understandable.
That's
Yeah,
why I
if-
wanted the qualifier, as long as, I don't think you can say that too many times, as long as you're in compliance.
Okay, so, everybody in agreement with this?
Yes,
So we can send this up to the planning board
yes,
to schedule a public hearing.
yep.
Yes.
Do we need a motion on that?
Yes.
Somebody make the motion.
So moved.
Somebody second the motion.
Second.
Okay.
Motion's been made and seconded anyway. All those in favor of sending this to the planning board?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
It is unanimous.
great,
We'll make it
With
unanimous.
corrections.
It's done.
With the
with
corrections.
revisions.
With revisions, so
Okay, the next item, commercial animal husbandry operations in the residential districts. And this applies only to R1, R2, and R3.
Shall we make a note that, oh, it's already there.
Give copies
It's
of
reading
this
on
to
top.
the, audience members.
I have some, who doesn't have them on the board first?
What's that?
The,
9.36,
yeah, 9.36.
You have it, you have it,
We have
you
it.
have it?
Mhm.
Did you get one, Corinne?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Nilda?
9.36?
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
Okay.
All right. This only pertains to commercial animal husbandry farms in the residential districts. We'll tackle RC later, but we need to get this done because we have several operations in the residential districts right now, being R1, 2, and 3. So, that's the only thing that this really, these comply with what basically attack. And, this is, we've gone around and around and around on this, and I guess the question would be, as I think I mentioned it down earlier, one of the biggest problems that we have had is trying to find out what is the accurate density that we should be looking at for commercial animal husbandry farms in the residential districts. And, we went to the best management practices, and, there actually is nothing in there. In the Maine Department of Agriculture, best management districts do not have density, based on either manure production or, grazing. And, there are some references to it, but unfortunately the links are broken. Talked to Matt Randall about that, and up at Agriculture, he's the compliance officer, and he agreed that yes, in fact, we do have an issue because our best management practices do have a lot of 404 and broken links. And therefore I can't give you an answer on it. So, what we've got is a bit of a dilemma gets down to what is in the best management practices right now,
More than-
doesn't really exist, or we can't
More
find
than-
it at this point. So, the issue will come up, we have the commercial animal husbandry farms that we did last time, and what I tried to do was, in reference to what I saw from, in talking to Matt, we can either go punt to the, to what we came up with for an animal unit for the family farms, which said animal unit is this, 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 and this. Or else we can go with the USDA standard, which we worked on last year. And we had brought up the issue also about, we also brought up the issue about confined, spaces. But I guess the issue is, in talking to Matt, he said most people who have confined spaces for animals also pasture their animals at least 6 or 7 months of the year,
Would depend upon the animal.
depending on the animal, absolutely.
We're still not pasturing rabbits.
Rabbits, I don't even want part of this, to be honest with you. Rabbits need to be included, but rabbits are not a pasture animal. They
I
are
know.
a confined space animal. You know, pigs can be a confined
Uh-huh.
space animal. Certainly, pets are confined, pets in wild pet, where ferrets, non-fur bearers,
Yeah.
are confined space. Ducks, well, except for a pond, certain poultry can be confined space. We know that chickens can be confined space. Even if they are, if they're not free range, they can be in a pen, they can be in cages. We don't like cages, because that's not cool to have cages these days, but chickens are raised in cages or in
Cages or
confined
coop?
space. Maybe in coop, they can be.
I mean,
in
a cage just sounds like it's single, but it turned out
One
a
of the
coop,
several
coop,
put in the cage.
a coop is a,
Limited free range.
Right.
multifamily.
Non-free
There you go.
range. That's a good idea. I like that. So the problem that I'm having with the commercial is, I'm not sure what to do. We had talked about just saying, whatever the best management practices say, but the problem is the best management practices don't say anything about this kind of activity. They probably will pertain to a large farm in the RC district, but smaller farms in, or smaller operations that might be in R1, 2, and 3.
And I thought there was a bunch of stuff that came out of Wisconsin that addressed. In this particular instance, it was just beef cattle.
Yeah.
So they didn't address a lot of the other animals, but they broke it down between, are they pastured? Is there, I figure out what the different definition of word, of mid was.
That's a managed pasture.
Right, but
That's
they
a
had,
that's a
they had-
high intensity managed pasture.
right, they had two different, they had intense management and not so intense management. And they broke it up between the kinds of animals. And I printed it out, but I had this time to print it out. All I have to do is find where that table is.
So did we finish the family?
No,
Piece?
no.
No,
No, what's happening though, in order for us to get the commercial animal husbandry done, we have to finish that up tonight, because we have to send it to a public hearing, but we also have to send it to the Department of Agriculture within 30 days, so this is giving, we essentially have 30 days in which to get a public hearing and any changes that get made to the animal husbandry, so that we can meet the requirements to send it to the Department of Ag.
Okay.
A question,
Thank you.
as you were speaking, you were saying, you were talking to somebody on the state there. You
yeah,
have somebody broken 404 links, okay? With those, all those broken, agriculture can come back in 30-day reference, and they might be able to put the links back together for their sake, but not finding it out for our sake. So they can change the rules as see fit.
You might.
They might, but one of the things that we had talked about was having them do the enforcement anyway.
Review.
Yeah. I can't find the table that had the link, what I was looking for, but they, Wisconsin essentially says that if it is intensely managed, you can get two cows per acre. So you're feeding them and pasturing them, and if it's not,
That was what we were looking for? That's when it's going.
yes.
There we go.
That's what I was looking for. And it lists dairy cows and heifers and beef and pigs and sheep and goats and llamas and alpacas and horses and elk and deer and pullet chickens and broiler chickens and layer chickens and turkeys. And they break it down. A dairy cow, 0.3 animals per acre. They say that a dairy cow, that is, needs 141,000 square feet.
A lot of money.
That's a lot of land.
And
3.25 acres.
This is also not Maine.
Well,
Depends on
Wisconsin,
what part of Wisconsin you are.
Wisconsin is very similar to Maine in terms of the latitude and the
USDA,
weather stuff and
USDA,
what USDA
Zones.
says, so
Southern Wisconsin is
it's
it,
identical to this area.
Yeah,
I
not for
have
so far.
a ton of questions. My first one is, why are we making this so hard? It seems to me that this should be a relatively simple thing.
I think we leave that designation of the animals and all of the other fun stuff up to the Department of Ag on the commercial properties.
I think so too. I mean, really, those guys have been at it a lot longer than we have, and we have nothing now, so, but that's gotta be better than,
Well, we don't
Yeah,
have.
I would disagree with that. We have what USDA told us. is reasonable.
Back
It's a
how
lot
long
less than
ago?
that.
How long ago?
Yeah,
It was last year.
last year.
And that is not
That was a
necessarily
kerfuffle
reasonable.
and a half.
Right?
It's more reasonable than that, that's for sure. That's very, wow.
To make some progress on this, could we maybe start at the beginning of this page and work our way down until we get the part that we really can't figure out? At least we have something done?
Could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we look at, the applicability is pretty straightforward. It's R1, R2, R3.
Yeah.
Then we have the designation criteria, minimum lot sizes for farms, for commercial animal husbandry. We have the setbacks, we have 10-acre minimum sizes, we have setbacks of 50 feet from the side and rear property line and 5 feet from the front property line. So that the cows can go, if the
Wander.
cows can wander right up to the
Right up to the
road.
road.
Yeah, usually the thing about that, as you recall, we talked about that, where there's usually a good space between the road and the adjacent neighbors, so you don't have that
Right.
problem. And that was the best place to put some of this stuff.
And is 5 feet enough? I mean, does it give
Yeah.
you enough of a parkway, so to speak?
Well, the reason why 5 feet, it ensures you also get on the other side of the fence.
Right, I totally agree, I just,
But the other thing is to 5 feet, but usually there's a gully, a ditch in between there, so you aren't gonna necessarily have,
Ditch isn't gonna be on your property, it's gonna be on the state right away or the town.
but still, there
but
is
you could be
But
5
it's-
feet
so
from
you
the
aren't gonna
road,
have
right?
parking problems,
No, it's
or
property line.
traffic problems,
Five
that's
feet
what I'm
from
trying to
the
get
I
at.
think that's funny,
Good point.
I think.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. And setback for feeding and grazing is 100 feet from a water supply well on any property.
I thought we decided in our last discussion that really should be 75 feet.
really?
It was 75 feet discussed, but turn on, generally speaking, where we were-
No, no,
It was
75
75 feet.
So
But-
we're
but-
75 feet.
That was somebody other wet dream, but we turned around, came out with the idea of 100 feet because it's required to be anything from a
No.
septic tank system to a well. That was the 100-foot
I
guideline,
know,
but
it-
75 was what we discussed last time.
Right,
Let's think about this though. I mean, this is a 10-acre parcel of land at the very least, right?
Mhm.
25 feet isn't gonna make that much difference.
Well, it might make that much difference to the abutting landowner.
No, and if I remember correctly, we went around and say a nay on that 75 feet,
yeah,
And how did it turn out?
75 feet.
75 feet.
I wasn't here, but I think 100 sounds better.
Well, what sounds good and what is
Well, I
reasonable
meant
may be two
the-
different things.
I'm sorry, I was not precise. I think
No problem.
any extra distance you can get from a well reasonably is the right thing to do. Why make it closer? If it's a 10-acre property, you should be able to get 100 feet away. And if it doesn't make a difference, 25 feet doesn't make a difference, then 25 feet doesn't make a difference either way.
It's not likely the well is gonna be on the line anyway.
Yeah, question.
Yes, sir.
Are there any setbacks for wells from neighboring properties?
Setbacks from pollution sources, yes.
Well, I
It's
mean,
100
like-
feet, it's 100 feet. HHE 200, Health and Human Services, Engineering.
Well, I guess what I mean is if I bought a property next to someone and wanted to drill my well on the line, is there like a setback rule for that?
For the well?
Yeah.
No, there's not a, for the well. What there
Okay.
is it's for the septic system.
It's
Okay.
100 feet from the well to the septic system.
So I could drill my well on my property line with my neighbor's house or whatever, and then that would kind of dictate what he can do.
It would push him off.
Yeah,
That's a
it
good
does.
question.
And
And
this,
the thing about it, wells is, they're not regulated. We don't regulate them,
Where
nor
you
does
can
the
put-
state. The state
If you
just
Depends on what's
regulates
in-
the water.
We
What-
said it was 100 feet from any well, because if it were from the property line, you'd have a well in the middle of the property. If it was a 1 acre lot that, like mine, that stretched back 6 acres, you could put your well in the middle of the lot, you couldn't put anything else there.
And,
Mm.
I
Which
mean,
would be problematic.
we're talking about pasturing and feeding, we're not talking about storage of,
No.
because we got into discussing what would happen with the compost and, not the compost, but you know what I'm talking about,
Manure pile.
manure piles. And that stayed at 100 feet. So when we're talking the 75 feet, we're talking about the pasturing and feeding.
and there's also a difference between pasturing and feeding and a septic system. The
Yes,
septic system is underground and is releasing the effluent underground, which puts it that much closer to the water table, which is what you're drawing your water from in the well. When you have animals on the surface of the ground, just like you have at night in your backyard that you don't even control, the manure is on the surface of the ground and it has all of that clay or
Filtration.
sand to filter through. So by the time you get to a drilled well level at, X number of feet, 60, 100, 200 feet, that water is very, very well filtered from any bacterial contamination. 75 feet is plenty for that,
On the flip side though,
yes.
a septic system is actually pre-treatment. It actually
Yes,
is
it is.
it's an anaerobic digestion system, but it already has reduced down
wasn't it from the
many of
state?
the pathogens and of
Mhm.
course, a lot of the nitrogen is soluble. But what it does is it basically pre-treats it and then disperses it underground. The thing about it is it deals with solids and contains the solids and containerizes the solids and keeps them from there. If you're bunkering your animals there and they're all defecating where they eat, which is usually what happens, then you're gonna have a concentration of that. And that's of untreated material. That's
Which still
at the
has all of
surface.
that soil to filter through. I don't see the 75 feet as a
And
problem.
the 75 feet in this is in line with what the state does, state rules.
Which state? Cause HHE
State
200
rules.
says 100, but which state rules?
Mm.
We've been through that.
We got that from our state inspector for pasturing within proximity of a well.
Is there any way you can get me that citation?
Sure.
I really appreciate that.
Probably maybe if it works.
I hope so.
It might actually even be in the document of that big book. Yeah, the pasteurized milk ordinance outlines, the pasteurized milk ordinance, the PMO,
Yeah,
has all kinds of regulations for everything from start to finish for dairy.
okay,
And it's probably in there, because that's where she cites everything
that'd
from.
be great, if you can get that, I'm all
But I
for
hate
it.
to go back with a new group, because we'll never get anything done, because as we change groups, then the decisions that we made at the last one will just get rehashed and we're not gonna get anywhere.
Okay, so
Well, I would say if I get a citation right now, I'm okay with something.
Luke,
Yes,
at last meeting when you were here, okay, is that how we, when we were discussing this, is that part of the basis, how we came up with the 75 feet?
Mhm.
Because, I mean, that way we have thoughts and,
But is everybody happy with the table,
No,
the way it looks now?
I still have a problem with minimum acreage.
Okay.
Oh, well, again, it depends upon what animals we're talking about. If you're talking about confined animals, 10 acres is too large a minimum lot size.
And I'm gonna say this is a residential neighborhood and we need to take care, it's supposed to be a residential neighborhood, not a commercial neighborhood, so I think 10 acres is fine.
Well, we're talking about the majority of town.
We're talking about commercial animal husbandry. In the
Right, but
R1, R2, and R3.
Right, we're still talking about the majority of town.
Actually, RC is the largest, and that's over half. The RC, rural conservation is over half the area.
Okay. If you went and looked at how many parcels and how many owners there are in comparison to 1, 2, and 3, it may be the bigger pieces of land, but as far as the number of people that live there and the number of pieces there are, you know, I can understand if you wanna talk about large animals, but I have to say, I side with Donna when you're talking about smaller animals. For one reason, and one reason only. If you start getting, if you're dealing with small animals, and you take this to town meeting, and they think that they can't do anything unless they have 10 acres, you will have nothing passed.
This
Been
is
there, done
commercial, I mean, that's the thing we have to sell. This is a large-scale commercial. This is not the small, this is big, this is where you're making a good amount of money. This is where your primary business is on farming. I'm making my money from farming.
Could,
That's what it's intended to do.
Is there any
If
way-
not, then there's the family farm that we were talking about.
is there any way we can distinguish between the minimum lot size for pastured animals, you know, livestock, for lack of a better term, and an operation that is for smaller animals, and, you know, might be 5 acres,
Well, if you look on
you know,
page,
confined animals.
if you look on page 3, it says confined livestock. The planning board may approve higher density limits for livestock and animals that are typically raised in barn shelters or small enclosures in pens such as chickens, rabbits, ferrets, guinea pigs, and similar species, provided the performance standard is met, which comes from the National Organic Standards for Livestock Committee Stocking Density dated September 9th, 2010, or a more recent density standard specified by the Maine Department of Ag Best Management Practices. That's going to allow people who want to have small animals, more of them, on this farm, on a 10-acre.
What, but that doesn't solve the problem for the person who has 5 acres and wants to do confined animals. That's, you know, that's my only point
That-
here.
That's solved by the fact that this is commercial, and those aren't.
No,
And in the R1, I'll tell you honestly, in the R1, we have very few 5-acre lots. The R1, we are almost built out on, in terms of usable land. We've got Schweikert property and a couple of 5-acre, less than and a little bit larger than 5-acre lots that are up and down. The northern part of the R1 district's pretty much tapped out.
well, that was where we left the discussion the last time, which was why you provided us with the maps, in terms of how many 5-acre parcels are we talking about?
We were talking about 5 to 7, and I say 7 because I was going over 5 acres.
Right. So between 5 and 10, right?
It's, yeah, they were less than 10.
The problem is I can't tell where the R1, R2, R3 are when I'm looking at these lots.
had those all delineated out. I thought I sent them an email, I might have them not. But we tried to basically show you, where at least in the R one, how many of those, and bring those maps together.
And so on this one, just out of curiosity, on the colors, if there's no color, does that mean it's less than 10 acres?
No, it means it's more.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on,
No.
on this one it's less, on this one, the green one it's more.
Which one are you on, the red?
The
keys on
the
the
white
side.
ones here are less than 10 acres.
Actually, and that does show the lot lines, this one does show, these are the R one lot lines, or the R one, district lines.
And the ones that are white are more than 10 acres?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Now, a lot of that unfortunately is unsuitable soils, a lot of wetland soils, a lot of floodplain soils, scientics and so forth. But, which is why also we have that lot line that goes along, that's only 1,000 feet, or excuse me, the district line that only goes 1,000 feet, because, there's a real soils change that occurs. It's not always 1,000 feet, but it's. it varies.
But if you look
It's
at
general.
these,
Yeah.
and you look at the 3 to 5s, which are supposed to be the greens, and the 5 to 10s, there are still quite a few of them in these areas.
You would also have houses on them. And dwellings or buildings on them. I was looking at unoccupied lots where I could. I didn't include those that are developed out or have structures on them. Because I don't have that database yet.
Oh.
I'm working on it.
From living here as long as I have, the majority of the farms that we have, that would be considered commercial animal husbandry, have houses on their farms. They live there. So having a building on it or house on it doesn't really faze me at all. It doesn't tell me anything.
You have a question from the audience?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Through the chair, I apologize for not trying to go back. What is the current definition of commercial for purposes of what you're discussing?
Do we have it?
No,
Yes, we did. Boy, it was a long time ago.
I thought we just had one description of animal husbandry, it wasn't split down to,
No, that's why we made the split between, all right, commercial, raising or breeding of domesticated animals are not traditionally recognized as pets for sale, resulting in more than $15,000 in net annual revenue, or at least 40% of the household income of the farmer. Animals can be housed in buildings or enclosures separate from residential buildings.
15 grand?
15 grand, net. Not gross.
That's under family.
No, 15 grand is the upper limit for family.
That's
This is
over
beyond
that amount.
15.
Over that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this is.
that's the
oh,
cutoff.
That's anything over that. If anybody wants to go higher or lower, that's fine with that. The issue is,
we went through that,
I know.
Yeah,
Last
I
week.
think we
Right.
just,
Any number we pick is wrong.
right.
Yeah.
That seems to be the reasonable compromise.
I did a client who's clearly a farm, and has been advertised on TV, and does well over, I wanna say last year, she probably did close to $100,000, and she lost money at the end of the day.
Well, that's fine.
Well,
But,
he's talking-
it- but,
they
but
said
that's,
net.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
They're saying net. If you apply net to this particular individual, then she's a family farm, because she didn't make any money, she lost money.
Yeah.
But she had $100,000 worth of gross.
Well, Mr. Taxman, tell us how you would prefer to do that.
We had that whole go-around,
Yeah, well,
Last
we're
time.
not gonna get.
and we
into-
left
Maybe
it,
that speaks more to your skill than hers.
And
No, I
I,
am talented in that area.
no, I'm okay with that. I just,
I'm just making the point that almost anybody with a good accountant is gonna have a family farm. It's not gonna be a commercial operation.
Since R1, getting back to the acreage, since R1 is the tightly packed residential district with 1 acre lots, the 10 acres might be appropriate. What if we reduce the minimum parcel size for R2 and R3? Because they're 2 acre lots to begin with. There are potentially more of the larger lots in the 5 acre area. And the houses are more widely spaced, so there would be less of a potential impact. They're a little less residential in terms of density. And again, because of the limitations of how many, large animals you can put on an acre, if you have 5 acres, you're certainly not going to be doing a commercial dairy farm on 5 acres, no matter how you slice that. But you still could potentially have a small, functioning commercial farm, in terms of confined animals and small animals.
And I think that would, to be quite honest, I find that to be a good
But
compromise.
in terms of the confined animals, it's irrelevant. Part of this ordinance addresses the issue of confined animals, and you come to the, remember, commercial farms are coming to the planning board for a conditional use permit. And if you are if you're going to be confining your animals, part of the regulation allows the planning board to give you more animals because they are confined and they are not free range and out roaming around. So I don't see that the argument of land is relevant to that point.
Okay, let me try this.
Okay,
I have 5 acres,
okay,
and I live in R2,
okay.
and I wanna start a commercial operation with parakeets. I'm tired of saying rabbits.
You're gonna keep those parakeets in a cage, let me know how
They're
that
gonna be,
works.
they're gonna be in a building. Anyway, it's small animals, confined.
Okay.
Now I come to you and I say, I wanna do this, and you look at this and you say, you're an R2, yes I am. How many acres do you have? I have 5 acres. I can't do it. So your comeback that it is the allowance for having more animals if they're small, doesn't do me any good because I don't have 10 acres. But I could do it on 5,
Okay,
I rest my case.
I don't think you have a case. I don't believe that the ordinance has to address every possible situation that could occur. We're talking about a commercial operation in a residential zone, and we're dictating what the standard has to be to have that. And I don't believe that going down to 5, because if we go down to 5, what's to prevent us from going down to 2 and having a really big barn for your parakeets?
Well, number one, this process is never a fast process. So probably none of us will be living by the time we get it down to 2 acres or 1 acre. I agree that in R1, it doesn't probably make a lot of sense because of the density. But in R2 and R3, I think that there are still a lot of 5 acre lots. And I agree with Donna, and I think that in 2 and 3, it makes sense. They're still gonna be limited by the number of animals they can have. But I hate limiting somebody to 10 acres if they've got 5. Because when I lived here, we didn't have these standards and people had animals on 5 acres. Actually, they had animals on less than 5 acres.
They still do.
Right, and they still do. And I guess the issue for me is that this town as a whole is an agricultural town. We're a sleeping community and a lot of people farm, have gardens and have animals. And that's what we do. If you go back and look at the study that they did on our town that we paid gazillions of dollars for,
25,000.
it doesn't matter to me, that's a lot of money. What did it say? We should take advantage of the fact that this is who we are. And that is, we're an agricultural town.
The only thing I have to say, I don't wanna sound like a spoilsport here, but the fact is, if you look at our demographics, we're not an agricultural town. Our agricultural worker population in our demographics has plummeted over the last 25 years.
And we have like about 20 agricultural workers that identify themselves in that in the census. And we are actually suburbanizing right now.
Right,
That
but if
doesn't
we
mean
do
don't
this,
wanna try to-
we're going to make it even worse, because we're taking away people's ability to even do it if they have less than 10 acres. And, number one, I wouldn't vote for it in this committee, and I wouldn't vote for it in a town meeting. And I think that you'd be hard pressed with people in R2 and R3 to agree that in order to be able to do this, you have to have 10 acres. And that's what I have to look at. It's not just what I want or what I agree. I have to think about I've been through enough of these town meetings and I've been through enough of these comp plans. I don't think this will pass with 10 acres in the R2 and the R3. I don't think it's gonna pass. I think people wanna have more latitude on what they can do on the property they pay the taxes and pay their mortgages for.
But understand this, right now, you're limited to 5 animal units in all those districts. That's it. Doesn't matter what the size is, but that's all you got is 5 animal units.
That's fine.
But 5 animal units equal, but each animal unit has a certain weight,
That's right.
okay? A chicken doesn't weigh as much as,
I understand that, Mike, and the point is that, that's what it is now, so it penalizes anybody who's doing large animals. For instance, you want horses on your property, doesn't matter if you're commercial or you're resident, or you're just doing it for the kids, or you're having a little subsistence on yourself. Right now, you get 5, so you get maybe 3 horses, that's about what you can get, 3 or 4 horses.
Well, that's what we're trying to fix.
That's what we're trying to fix.
Exactly.
We're trying to
And
allow a commercial
this-
farm that is going to insert itself into a designated residential district, and a commercial, not a family, something that's gonna be a lot more intense,
Understand that.
in a way that it's not gonna have an impact. And that's the issue, really. And to actually add more opportunity, provide more opportunity for a farm, a commercial farm to actually go where it is appropriate. I mean, right now, we have a farm, we have a growing farm that used to be farm, that frankly is part of the motivation we're trying to do this commercial stuff, is we're trying to make it so that individual who has more than adequate land for the grazing, and he is animal husbandry oriented, not agricultural.
Right.
Trying to get it so that actually he can do what he wants to do and what would be beneficial for his business and probably beneficial for the community in achieving that goal
And
that we're
we
talking
understand that, and if
Absolutely.
it's limited by what you can have per acre, okay?
about.
So how many chickens, or how many cattle, or how many guinea pigs, or whatever you can have on an acre. Reducing it in R2 and R3 down to 5 acres is really not gonna have a lot of impact, except for the fact that it will allow some people who at 10 acres wouldn't be allowed to do it. And people are gonna look at this 10-acre limitation as restricting what they can do with their property. Lived here long enough, 38 years, and I can tell you what will happen.
So, we're all confronting, I guess, the different philosophical viewpoints that we bring to this. But at the end of the day, it seems to me, if we make a wrong decision either way, to be either too restrictive or not restrictive enough, if we are too restrictive, then it's gonna ultimately tend to constrict, cut off, and terminate the agricultural bent of the community. If we aren't restrictive enough, there is a safety mechanism, and that's the civil law. And I know that everybody sort of recoils at the idea, oh, that means you have to bring a lawsuit to deal with a nuisance that's presented by a commercial enterprise that has plunked itself down permissibly and then now has either grown or to the point where it is presenting a nuisance. But if that happens, then you do have that safety net of the civil law available. We don't have that safety net in the other direction. If we are too restrictive, I think that's gonna be a bad thing for the town ultimately.
I'll be right with you. The other thing that I think you need to look at, on a 5-acre lot, when you start looking at it saying, I have to have my feed and grazing area set back from the well, my manure composting facility, setback from the water supply, you've restricted yourself if you're looking at 5 acres, because you're gonna have a really hard time finding enough land to pasture animals and meet those requirements.
And we understand that, okay? The problem is that when you put this too restrictive, people don't care about their own restrictions. What they see is that you're restricting them from being able to do something with their property. So this rule in itself, okay, the rest of the rules, like how far you can be from a well, or how far you can be from the property line, those things are gonna restrict it in itself. So what I'm saying is that I don't think we need to be as restrictive with the acreage, because the rest of the stuff is gonna restrict it for us. So we don't have to look like we're being restrictive to them by restricting that they can't do it on 5 acres, when in some cases they might be able to. But if they can't because they can't meet the rest of the standards, then that's the issue with the standards. It's not the issue where we say, you can't do it unless you have 10 acres.
And I do understand what you're saying, I really do understand what you're saying. We are talking about a commercial operation in a residential neighborhood,
Not family.
not a family. We are talking commercial in a residential neighborhood. And I think that the people who live in that residential neighborhood would appreciate having their property rights protected against the possibility of having a commercial operation in the area. Chip, you had a, I'm sorry, before I get to you, Chip, this fine lady had a.
That was my question. These guidelines are for a commercial
Commercial
operation
operation.
only, so there's gonna be an overlay of uses for family farm.
That's correct, and we're working on that one as well.
Okay, so when you cited an example, there's a client of yours, a friend, whatever, who has a commercial operation, but the income fell within the family farm.
Yep.
So how do you, on a 10-acre farm, can she then call that a family farm? I mean, if it's listed.
No, because she'd have to come to the town for a conditional use permit for the commercial operation. So she would be declaring herself as a commercial operation. The fact that she didn't make any money, well, she got a nice tax break, but that's a completely other issue.
So she's not listed as a commercial farm?
Yeah, she is.
Yes, she
Yes,
is.
she is.
She would be listed as a commercial farm. She'd have to come to the planning board, get a conditional use permit, and establish the fact that she has a farm. Chip?
I apologize, I don't have the current documents that you guys are working from. Are you just ignoring
Next one.
the, thank you. Ignoring is maybe the wrong verb, but what about family farms that don't meet that 15,000?
We're not touching family farms at this point. We're strictly giving.
But if you're not,
We're gonna do it after, Chip.
If you're not, then they're still stuck with 5 animal units.
You missed the intro. We need to get the commercial done so that we can have a public hearing and send it to the Department of Agriculture within 30 days of the town. It has to be there 30 days before town meeting. So if town meeting is on June 12th, we need to get this, we need to have the public hearing and any changes that get made at the public hearing done by May 12th, so that we can send it up. If we don't send it up, we can't put it on, in the town warrant. And that's, so we're gonna work on the commercial and get that, hopefully get that taken care of today, so that the planning board can schedule the public hearings and have enough time to make a change if something shows up at the public hearing. And then we can proceed on from there and work on the families. So,
And it sounds sloppy, but it is. But the reason why we're doing it is because we do have a commercial farm. We have a potential commercial farm right now. And, that has more than enough acreage and has a desire to expand their livestock herd. And if we don't do this, that person can't do it again for another year.
Are you talking about hardscrabble?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, I'd like to do the family one before that time too, get them both done. Get this done and out the door.
And
We're
we
running
mu-
out of
it's,
time.
it's theoretically possible that we could get the family farms done, but we don't have to send that up to the Department of Ed.
Yeah,
We
we
have
do.
to, we have to send them to commercial, we have to send them to
We have to
family
send
farms as
any
well.
farm. Yeah, any farm.
Well, then we better get
The
looking.
good news is that we have made some headway on the family farm, we're not starting from ground zero. We're, gee, this close. So once we get past, it may turn out that way, but not right now. And once we get past this, that should be hopefully relatively easy. I don't see much point in arguing back and forth anymore about whether it should be 10 acres or 5 acres. I think we just need to make a decision. I mean, I think we've heard all the arguments. I thought your argument was a good one. You know, I don't like the idea of restricting what people can do. That's been obvious. So,
Somebody make a motion.
Well, wait, I have a question for Jens. So if you think, what I took away from your comment is that you think 10 acres is too restrictive. You think it's too restrictive having a 10-acre requirement for all the districts that we're discussing right now?
I think, it would be better to have less restriction, and so therefore go down to perhaps 5.
In the R2 and R3.
With the understanding that as long as they remain in compliance.
Oh, they have to be in
Right,
compliance.
so they have, I guess, I'm into reiterating, I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical
Right,
thing.
and they
The more
still
you
have to
s-
follow all the
The more
units
you
know,
say it, but hopefully the more it sinks in.
And if it, if it doesn't work, I think, if it doesn't work, it's because the civil law is not providing a remedy, then perhaps it's time to think about going to a more restrictive regime, but I think it's easier doing that than going the other way around.
And that is the other point. This does not apply to any existing operation. This is only gonna apply to new operations. So anybody who's got 6.4 acres and has a farm right now, or 3.4 acres and has a farm right now, they're still gonna have,
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to put that in the language.
Yes,
yes, yeah, we'll have to put it in, but it's never been, or at least in my knowledge, it's never been our intention to restrict current operations. Even from the planning board point of view, when we do stuff, it's always the new person, the new applicant.
Right.
that-
But I think for property owners, I think that looking at 5 versus 10 will be more palatable. And I think that the other restrictions are going, as you said, are going to restrict it. The well place, how many you can have, because of the size of lot you have, is still going to restrict them. It's just going to give them the ability to do it, even though they're gonna be restricted.
We still need a motion.
I have a question for you about your motion. If there's somebody who owns something and doing something now, okay, the grandfather will call it.
Yep.
Okay, what happens, because if they sell and somebody else comes in and wants to follow through the same idea, are they still grandfathered?
Wouldn't it be the property that would be grandfathered?
Goes with the property.
Yeah.
I'm just asking
Yep.
for a thought.
It goes with the property, so yeah.
Right.
Huh?
If it's discontinued for 2 years, then
Right,
you have to start all over.
right, the basic, right, our basic grandfather laws,
Yep.
which means that if you close out the business, you can't just come back in 3, 4, 5 years later and decide you wanna start back up again.
What happened if they would buy like an extra acre or something? We went from 6.4 acres to 7.4.
Well, if the standard was 5, it wouldn't make any difference. They just have more land.
Yeah.
If the standard were 10 and they sold an acre, then they'd have a problem.
Okay.
But that's a self-inflicted wound.
So the I guess what Luke is, it's Luke, right? The acquisition of more property doesn't necessarily
Doesn't hurt 'em.
change,
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt
you
them.
know, what you're, the fact that you're operating, just because you,
Right, it would just allow you
Right.
more units because you own more
Correct.
property.
right,
But you wouldn't be subject to the units because you'd be grandfathered, right?
Well, yes, I see what you're saying.
Oh, okay, oh, the grandfathered one,
If it's already allowed, it would continue to be allowed.
yes,
for the new property? So if
If
he
he added-
buys an acre So whatever he does on the additional acre would be governed by the rules of the original grandfathered farm? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it would.
Well, what if they go to town hall and have the two pieces put together?
I mean,
Because I
Isn't
did
that what
that
you
with
were
mine.
asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're contiguous,
Would be added to the existing property.
So if it's a single lot, even
Well,
though
I
it's
guess it,
originally.
it
fixed.
So
depends.
would
Let's-
the original rules apply, or would new rules
let's assume that they
apply?
have something going right now that has 3 acres. And they go and they buy another acre of land. Well, right now, they would be considered to be legally non-conforming. And if they changed that, they'd have to come get before the planning board and get a conditional use permit, because they had expanded that out to make it legally conforming. They'd have to come back before the planning board.
okay, question on that. How about if they buy the land, but contiguous means that one butts to another? What happens if it's not contiguous? Meaning that it might be separated on one side of the street to another?
Two separate
Two
properties.
separate properties, just like in.
I'm just,
Yep, no, like it's 2 separate pieces of property. It's, to have the commercial farm, it has to be contiguous.
So I don't wanna beat a dead horse, so if he bought the extra acre of land and his current farm is grandfathered, would the new acquisition
acreage.
also be grandfathered and governed by the old rules of the grandfathered farm, or by the newer rules that now govern property? That's what I think that's what he's asking, and I'm curious too.
In the residential district, you'd want the new rules, because they're gonna be much more stringent, less stringent than the
Less
old ones.
stringent,
They're gonna be
yes.
They'll be less stringent than the old ones. So you'd wanna come back to the planning board and say, I need to change and get it, so that you can operate under the new rules. Under the old rules, it's very restrictive.
So would the, I hate to, I just wanna make sure I understand this. So the original farm would remain grandfathered? Or would the acquisition of the new land put the whole piece of property, under the new rules? What happens to the
It's
two
my
parcels?
understanding that the original parcel would be grandfathered, and it would stay that way. Now, if you went and you bought another piece of land to add into,
Right,
you're gonna have to come back to the planning board, because under the current rules, you can't expand a legally non-conforming use. You are restricted to whatever it is that you had at that point. So if you bought another piece of land, you would have to come back in front of you would have to come in front of the planning board and say, I've expanded my farm, and then you would have to get the planning board's blessing.
But
And
in
then
this
new
case,
rules
wouldn't it
would
be
apply.
beneficial, because on these rules?
Yes, it would be beneficial.
These rules are better than what they're grandfathered under.
And I agree,
Right.
it would be beneficial, but to Luke's point, they would have to come in.
Mm.
Alright.
And so that they could get the restriction lifted and make it easier for them.
Yeah, make a motion then?
Absolutely.
So we're looking at the design designation criteria under 9.3.6, and I'll move that we revise the minimum parcel size for contiguous lots to be 5 acres in each of the R1, R2, and R3 zones.
And I thought we were gonna make
No,
R1
no,
R1
R1 and
a
R3.
10 acre.
R2 and R3.
R2 and R3, I'm
and
sorry,
R3.
I misspoke. R2 and R3.
A motion has been made to modify the design criteria to show 5 acres in R2 and R3, and with a recommendation for adoption.
Second that, we want to have some discussion on
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded, let's have some discussion.
My, first, contiguous, if it's a parcel, isn't it already contiguous?
Yes,
So,
but that would bring up Luke's point, what if I bought another parcel? What if I bought the parcel across the street? No, it's across the street, they're not contiguous.
so you could add 1 acre and still be less than the threshold?
I
Is that
think
what that's for?
I think that word is probably in there because maybe somebody's got 2 parcels that are 4 and 8 acres, or
Okay.
4 and 2 acres, and,
Good.
right? Is that what we're talking about?
Okay, so two
contiguous properties, maybe each of 5 acres, in R1, say.
Yeah,
But two different tax bills.
Okay, okay.
right,
All right, good.
two separate lots.
That's one question. The other is, and I'm sure I can really, probably already discussed this, why not R1 be the same as the others? I know you have your opinion on
Because of the 1 acre lot sizes, and these are 2 acres to begin with.
that.
So this is a more densely populated area, either as we speak or potentially because of the 1 acre minimum lot size.
So it'll be more sensitive.
Just
It's a more sensitive area.
Even though that one property is not as dense as the rest, it's already at 10 or 20 acres. So if someone has.
You guys don't have to worry about the 10 acres.
Yeah, if they already have 10 or 20,
So
they
some-
don't have to
So
worry.
if someone has 9 acres, they're out of luck now.
Okay, one other thought, question for you.
Clarify that.
Okay. That is at R1. Okay. Where does it fall on the idea under DB1, because usually that's 1 acre?
That's a completely separate issue, because we're just dealing with the residential neighborhoods right
Yeah,
now.
we're just doing residential,
doing the
we're not
R1.
getting.
Okay, no, I mean, I'm just,
Oh, yeah, no, I understand, we'll end up dealing with that at some point. Chip?
What about a situation where a farm straddles a road?
and it has property on both sides.
Is it all one
Yeah.
property?
Well,
Maybe-
you know what?
Maybe moves their cows back.
Yeah, but it's gonna be
across the road
grandfathered.
every once in a while.
What's the likelihood of that developing in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Let's
would-
not get bogged down with that.
Chip, to your point, it would be grandfathered right now.
I know,
And
I understand that, but it's a totally practical, possible thing for somebody to do in the future.
Is it the same property though? Both sides under 1D?
No,
Two different properties.
But it could conceivably still be part of one business.
Depends on the status of the road too.
Yeah. If it's a town road, there's no way it can be contiguous.
There's a right of way, it can't get contiguous. Established right of way in the road.
Well, I don't know, I
No,
have,
that's
I
not
have a
true.
right of way through my property and they
Right of way
consider,
being a right of way for a private way, for legal access. That, it's a private road, no different than a town road, except it's private way. That's all.
Any more discussion on the designation criteria 2?
Anybody else from the public?
I just have a question, it may not be pertinent to your motion on the table, but, when do we talk about R four, and that doesn't occur on this
We don't.
chart? Well, we need to say something about R four.
R4 is not a residential district, we're just dealing with R1, 2, and 3 at this point. We will eventually
We
deal with
will,
it.
eventually, we're just, right now, we're
Shouldn't it
trying
be
to
part
get
of all the same ordinance where you say R four, at least reference what you're
No,
gonna do with it?
because R4 is rural conservation and may have a very different set of criteria. It'll have the same base, but the details and significant details may be different.
I would expect that they probably will be.
R4 is not subject to the animal unit stuff now, correct?
There's unlimited animal units in the R4.
Right.
Right.
The issue is, the only reason this came up now, the only reason we're dealing with 1, 2, and 3 is because we're trying to get, actually, we're trying to get R1 through, fix that, and get that passed, but we can't do R1 without attacking the animal unit thing, unless we just keep it the way it is right now, which is, yeah, you get 5 animal units and that's it.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, one other one. In the R1, okay, how many animal units are you allowed?
5.
If you have more than 5 acres?
5.
If we pass this,
Oh, no, not if we pass it.
That's what I'm
No,
saying.
there's a whole new-
There's a whole density.
we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Right,
that's why I'm trying to,
Right now, we're just trying to get through this first chart.
chart one,
There's
Chart
four
one.
pages, guys.
We're just trying to get through the first chart.
Yeah.
chart one.
Yeah.
chart one.
Let's
We haven't even got.
stick with chart one.
I wanna, somebody move the question.
I move it.
Okay, the
Move.
question has been moved. All those in favor of the designation criteria for R1 being 10 acres, R2 and R3 being 5 acres on this chart, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? It is unanimous.
All right.
Now we can look at,
Item number 2.
we can look at,
The animals are all dead now.
when it comes to this, the animal densities,
Well, let's get through the chart first.
Let's
not
get through
turn
the
page
chart.
yet.
We hit chart one, now we're going to chart two.
Well, yet, or we're gonna,
oh,
that's gonna be
I'm
based
ready to go
upon.
to 75.
I thought we had- I thought we had said-
Just double
Yeah.
checking, okay.
75?
No,
As long as you
Lucas
give me a
gonna get
reference,
on the,
like-
I checked with the CDC and theirs is 50.
Oh.
Just give me the 75.
Don't make
Next
this
thing
one
you know, we're
tough.
gonna have a pile of manure over the well cap.
Right.
so
As
assuming,
long as the casing goes all the way down.
let's,
Not a
let's,
shallow well.
hey guys, let's vote on this chart with the assumption that Lucas will get the 75 feet. The reference for the 75 feet to the town planner. If he does not, then it will stay at 100.
That's
I
a
can
good,
live with that,
yeah,
I
I
agree
agree.
with that as well.
yeah.
Okay. Somebody make a motion.
I'll make a motion
Is
that
there a
we,
second?
that we take the setback from, of feeding and grazing areas from water supply well and, from water supply well on any property, reduce it from 100 to 75 feet as long as we can get the documentation, that's how the state looks at it. If we can't, then it will revert back to the 100 feet that's on the chart.
Is there a
I
second?
second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, can we use the word minimum?
Yeah, well, it's minimum, when are you doing setback anyways?
Just,
Yeah, that's true.
okay,
Any other discussion?
you will wait for Tom to come back, so we have a vote?
Let's move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous.
Now-
With
Minus-
with one abstention.
Now we're cooking.
Okay,
Okay.
so now we should vote on that chart as a whole. Now that we've made all of these changes, somebody make a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the changes that we have made to designation criteria chart.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the changes to the chart and accept the chart. Any discussion?
Yeah, you're in your R two and R three. No, no, R two and R three, are you still leaving that, even though we set the acreage back?
We've already moved to make that
We're
adjustment.
still here. We're still here, honey.
Okay, never mind.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, to Donna's point, we were talking earlier, because we talk about animal densities. You know, if we're gonna follow best management practices, let the Department of Ag tell them what they can do and what the animal density should look like. Because we can't find anything, no matter where we look. We're not having
Yeah.
any luck.
Let's
Wait a
do
minute, I
that.
did all this for nothing, you're not gonna even look at it?
Nope,
I
No.
looked at it and I say we go with.
I looked
Nope.
at
This
this.
is
All right,
US, these
yeah.
are USDA.
Okay, everybody look at it.
Okay,
yeah, okay, I motion that we go with the state.
Just as impressive.
But the state doesn't have anything, that's the point.
yeah, but what do we do
USDA
then?
does.
What do we do then?
Well,
Since they
what do
don't-
you, so what do you, Department of Agriculture, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, state does not have anything.
What we
They
have
can't
here
The
is-
Department of Agriculture is it the state?
That's what I'm saying, the state of Maine does not have densities on this, the United States Department of
Fed.
Agriculture.
Oh, okay,
does.
federal Department of
Federal
Agriculture.
Department, that's why I said that.
So,
But the Maine Department of Agriculture is gonna enforce it, so let them figure out how to deal
Yep.
with the density aspect.
I can deal with that.
Because I don't know, they don't know what they're doing, and I don't know what they're doing, and I can't understand it. I can understand a lot of really strange stuff.
No, but then it takes that relationship and it moves it back to the person who wants to have the animal husbandry and the Department of
That's
Agriculture.
correct. And we don't have to get into the weeds. of
Exactly.
that. So that would bring us down to, I think we want to, if you look at D, item D, 3D, well, 3 is animal densities. If you look at D, it's confined livestock. with minimum areas and manure management, and I think we should keep that. Just so that it's in there, and it's still, the manure management, they have to give us a nutrient management plan if they get nailed. If the Department of Ag says you're gonna do a nutrient management plan, they should have to give it to us. We can't do anything with it, because we won't understand it.
So what happens to all of that language? Does that just get deleted?
Would it be replaced by reference to?
Reference to the Department of
So
Agriculture.
we need animal density, we need some sort of
Well, see,
sentence here that says.
this is the thing here that I think we should
Yeah,
keep.
I know where that is. I wanna know what happens between the end of the chart and when we get to page 3B.
So this, well,
I think the
the end of the
animal
chart
densities will
is
refer them to the
animal
Department
densities,
of
is the
Agriculture.
assignment of stocking points and the nutrient management plan, all of which get referred to the Department of Agriculture,
That's
best
what-
management
That's what I'm
practices.
asking. Are we going to put a sentence in here that indicates that?
We should.
All right. So, animal densities to be determined by,
Well, I think animal densities, I think the nutrient management plan, and the livestock density by zoning district should all be based upon the Department of Agriculture's best management practices. And those are the guys that are gonna enforce it.
I agree with you.
Mm.
I just wanna know what goes in our document.
Yeah, we'll have to get Ted to look up the language on it,
Okay. All right.
Okay.
but I think it'll be just as
So it's
easy.
just a
So,
one sentence collective referral.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was asking
Sorry,
Milton a
let's
whole
go
lot
ahead.
just.
No, go ahead, Milton.
No, I was just asking about the nutrient management plan, because, I know that's very, very difficult to achieve whatever it is they need you to do
We
without
are not
a
gonna
lot of
touch that,
expense.
we're leaving it up to the Department of
So
Agriculture.
that would punt it, basically, kind of like that.
Yeah, pretty much. We're gonna take that ball and hand it to them, you guys play with it, because we don't want. Go ahead.
Question,
No, Jens has.
okay.
Yes, so we're just gonna do a one, sort of a one sentence or two sentence, collective referral to those three subject areas,
That's correct.
animal densities, livestock densities by zoning district.
Yeah, so say, please refer to,
And leave,
Confined
and
livestock.
leave, and he was
I
thinking
would-
of
I would
leaving
leave
D.
the confined livestock with the minimum areas section can be in there. So we could say, if you wanna do something, you could come to us and ask, or we could just say, no, leave that up to the Department of Ag as well.
I think you should leave it up to the Department of Ag. As long as you're referring everybody, you know, on most of this, why not use that as your, fallback and let them refer to the Department of Agriculture?
Because they're the ones that are gonna have to,
Okay.
I mean, if ultimately, if somebody wants to fight you, they're gonna go back to the, you know, the Department of
So
Agriculture.
everything in item number 3, under animal densities, both of those charts and everything through to number 4, the performance standards. Come on, we can put a note in, that we'll have to figure out how to word a note that says the best management practices for the Department of Agriculture.
Well, I think you leave the chapter headings, so confined livestock, minimum areas, and manure management, and you say, please refer, or this is governed by the Department of the Federal Department of Agriculture. So,
No,
I don't
state,
think you
Maine
have,
Department of
or,
Agriculture.
no, it's not, the state doesn't have anything.
They do,
Oh, they do.
none of
They
their
do.
links work.
Oh, none of
Nothing
their
works up
links
there.
work.
They're the ones that are gonna be responsible for
Then
managing.
say that, but leave these separations of the different headings, so people, so it's clearer.
Okay.
all right, Ted, when we label these, the animal density, the livestock density, and confined livestock, how are we going to word that to refer them back to the Department of Agriculture?
That's all he said.
One question though, these tables were, you pulled these together, right? And these are
Actually,
the
no,
product
these were
of-
put These were put together by Wayne Monroe, actually.
so, for example,
who's, from USDA.
all right, so he put in that fur bearers are prohibited,
No,
and
we
he put,
get that.
yeah, that's what I thought, so we're not jettisoning that, right? We're not jettisoning the tables, or are we?
We have to.
All
I
right,
mean, if you're gonna leave it to them,
so does the Department of Ag, are they gonna allow for fur bearers and guinea hens and,
you gotta make those decisions. I mean, you know, the simple fact is fur bearers was because you guys had decided, well, the board had decided a while ago that we didn't wanna have
fur bearers?
chinchilla farms and mink farms and fox farms in the town of Verona.
No, I
You
don't
wanna have the
think, I
slaughter
see
of
people
that.
breaking down their doors to come here to do that.
No, that's a Minnesota thing. That's where the farms are basically, Minnesota. And peacocks, the issue with peacocks and guinea hens was nuisance. Just like, the whole idea of the billy goats was nuisance. You should remember what Doc said about billy goats. Those were nuisances in a residential district. Those were
Right, and
nuisances.
what we're doing here would not change that.
Sure it would. We're aggregating that.
We would have to
Well,
specifically.
no, because if you have a piece of property and you wanna have 2 guinea hens, there's nothing that's gonna stop you from having that.
Well,
Cause
yeah,
it's not gonna fall under commercial, it's gonna fall under family farm, and there's nothing that's gonna stop you from having that.
And if we wanna regulate that when we get to family farms, we can exclude it.
Right, but right now we're dealing with commercial, and I don't want to get through it.
All right,
Well, the question is, to answer your question, you want fur bearers? Do you want a mink farm here in the town of Verona?
Why couldn't you leave the chart, but do,
The chart relates.
Yeah, you
that-
can't.
relates
If you're
back?
not, if you're not going to do a density, and you're not gonna have the incentive of doing a management, this is an incentive program where this is the base, and then if you do the management plan, the nutrient management plan, which for commercial operations, larger commercial operations, I believe Maine wants you to do, certainly USDA pushes hard on that.
Well, what
You get a density bonus that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Okay,
So
what
it's
we
an
can
incentive
do-
based.
is we can refer everybody to the Department of Agriculture and put a clause that
So
says,
no fur
with the
bearers.
exception of fur bearers, which will not be allowed.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can't we put that under
Yeah.
performance
Sure.
standards?
Yeah, we could say.
Yeah, we could
Yeah.
just, yeah.
That seems to
So we
me
just
to
have
be
to
the
address
easiest.
ourselves to the things we wanna prohibit, period.
Yes.
And it looks like we already did that.
Yep.
So,
No, go ahead.
well, just to identify the fur bearers and the guinea fowl and male peacocks.
Are we saying you can't have them at all, we're prohibiting them?
We're prohibiting them in the R1 based
R1.
on the chart.
On the chair, yeah.
All right, so if we're gonna do this, we better make sure, That we go
Which chart?
through and-
Are we in the next chart? We're talking about, let's talk about.
Three or four.
Okay.
Right?
Alright, so you wanna do peacocks, guinea fowl, and fur bearers, that part of the chart will remain, is that correct?
Yeah.
Or we won't call it chart, we'll just put it prohibited.
Guidelines.
Right now, we're gonna say prohibited,
Yeah.
limited, livestock limitations, something like that.
right, you can say, it would be referred, or go by the Department of Agricultural Standards,
Except for.
with the exception of peacocks, guinea hens, and fur bearers, and then keep
Billy
those.
goats, so let's not forget billy goats.
Where are the
Put-
billy
put
goats?
billy
I
goats
don't
in
see
there.
the billy
I
goats.
just see
in
goats.
there.
They're not there, but,
Why, well,
cause I don't wanna enrage Doc.
oddly enough, I don't think that should be the basis for an ordinance.
No,
Okay, thank you.
because if you have a
I'm
commercial,
sure Dot does.
all right, if you have a commercial farm and you're doing goats, okay?
You need
how-
a
Have
billy,
male
you
goat.
need a
We're
billy.
gonna have to have a male goat.
Well,
Yes.
then why don't you prohibit it in the R1? Cause that seemed to
Well,
have
if you have
been
a
the issue.
commercial farm in the R1, and you have a big enough area,
Oh, then you can have a male, then you can have a billy goat.
and the idea of the nuisance birds, one of the problems with guinea fowl, if you've ever been
Yes,
around
they're
them,
very annoying,
well, they're not only that, but they also like to fly onto the neighbor's property.
yes,
They love to,
and they're noisy.
yeah. So we, okay.
So I say we leave the billy goats alone,
Okay.
but I
like your
can
suggestion.
deal with the peacocks, guinea fowl, and fur bearers with the way this is written.
Okay.
I do have a minor technical question.
What's that?
A female peacock, I believe they're peafowl,
Hmm.
and you have
Yeah.
peahens and peacocks.
Yeah,
But a
right.
female peacock
You
is
say well,
an interesting dichotomy.
well, only because,
I'm not going
no,
there.
you're right, no, you're right, but
That's
it's,
Chloe.
that's how most people,
Well,
well,
no,
the people who are gonna be doing it, are
Everybody
gonna
says,
know what
look
a
at the
peahen
peacocks,
is.
I understand that, but to be technically correct,
Mhm.
It's like saying a female moose instead of a cow, correct?
well, no, they're all moose.
Nobody calls them female moose.
They're all
Exactly,
peacock.
that's
Well-
the point I was making.
That's
And
not a
what you're saying-
biological issue, that, I was
That's
approaching it from the the chicken thing is another thing. They're all chickens,
Right.
and you have hens and roosters.
And-
So when you say that, you know,
Limitations on
Speak,
moose.
it just slipped.
So
Mom,
Diane?
leave him alone.
anyway,
Diane, I think to your point, if you would turn that into a motion so that we can keep that.
Okay,
Same
I'd
table.
like to make a motion that on the table 9.3.6.2, the maximum number of livestock, that when we amend the language to refer to the Department of Agriculture standards, that we leave the peacocks or
Peafowl.
peafowl, the guinea fowl, and the fur bearers with the current restrictions in the table.
a second.
We're doing a table or
Motion has been made. and
Yeah,
seconded.
Guidelines.
language?
We need to use the narrative language, because we're jettisoning the table.
Right, yes, we'll have to use.
Well, it's different for the three districts though, is it not?
Yes.
Yes,
It is.
So we have
so
to.
you'd have to leave this
So
piece
you don't
of the
have to
table.
have a table, you can just say in R1, the following are prohibited.
Now, this is easier reading.
I like tables, I like to look at it quickly and not get
And
stuck
just-
in it.
Yeah, I don't have an
Just
issue
leave the
with
table
that,
in.
I would
Then
just
make
leave
the
the
table.
For
table,
discussion is show and tell.
Yeah, just leave the table in,
leave these
That
three
section.
lines.
okay? Any other discussion?
Yeah, question for you,
Yeah, Marty.
through the chair. Milda, do you see any issues or problems as described as now?
No, I think you wanna just be sure that you're consistent, so you don't have anything in the table that would be inconsistent with what those USDA regs say. And I think you're doing that, so I think you're good. Only thing is under 4C, make sure you change that to 75 to be consistent with your earlier motion.
Right.
Oh, yes,
Um,
thank you.
We'll probably even eliminate that. since
Yeah, it's already above
Yes,
anyways.
redundant.
Okay. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor of amending that table?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It is unanimous. Wonderful.
And one other small language thing, if we're going to keep the headings, where it says confined livestock, could we put / small animals?
Mhm.
I thought we were taking that up.
Well, the suggestion was made, I think Susan made the suggestion, we keep those headings.
Well, we could just keep
Oh, for
confined
AB.
No, because
livestock.
I thought, when I say I
No,
thought we
we
were
don't.
doing that, I thought that was going to be animal densities.
Yeah.
Do we even need it?
Oh, I thought we had taken it out.
Well, let's put it this way, if we're going to keep that heading, do you want to keep those headings, measuring areas and,
No, I got persuaded that we didn't need to.
okay.
Oh, we're gonna take all of
Because the
it, all of
department,
it out?
well, you're the one
All
who
the
said
headings-
department, take that out and let the Department of
Well, I
Agriculture.
said take out the language, but leave the heading,
Right,
because people are gonna wonder what the Department of Agriculture governs. And by saying combined livestock minimum areas and manure management, at
Okay.
least
that's,
it gives them a signpost in terms of, you know, what they should be thinking about. And after each one of those colons, you should just say, please refer
to
to the Department of
Department of
Agriculture
Agriculture,
standards,
best
or
management practices.
these rules are governed by the Department of
Yeah.
Agriculture.
But if we
Right.
do
And
that, I
along
think
those
Donna's,
lines, that confined livestock
please.
/ small
Yes.
animals.
You shall,
So that
Like that.
you will.
everybody realizes we're talking about all sorts of animals, not just the big ones.
Okay,
Well, I think it referred to just animals there, and we could put in small animals.
Well, we're
No,
not
because
even
it-
gonna
it does,
define
it
it,
says
we're just,
confined
refers-
animals, that would work too.
it refers
that's
to
what I
livestock
said.
and animals that are
it
typically
should only say
raised and
confined
confined.
animals, period.
What am I supposed to put there? We're stripping it all out, so what's,
Please refer to the Department of Agriculture standards.
That's what it says below.
Right, but by including all the extra language,
Yeah, but we're not
it
gonna have.
confuses people.
Why not?
Because then they think that's the Department of Agriculture language.
Best management practices.
Okay, let me ask you something here, very honestly, from a functional standpoint, this is more for these guys. This is a conditional use, it's gonna come to the planning board. What are you gonna get from them for documentation?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought that far down the road.
Why didn't you say that to us 15 minutes ago?
Well, it would be
But
the Department of Agriculture, or whatever they would have
They
to
act
They
slow.
would have to bring the
bring that
reference.
to us.
I think,
Lucas,
Yes, sir.
Department of Agriculture require a permit for a farm?
From us, they do.
From you, okay.
you're a dairy farm.
Yeah, if you're commercially producing something, then I don't know the other industries, but like our inspector has a book that thick.
Right.
And I mean, we're talking like, you can't have fly waste on a light bulb in your barn. So I mean, there's a whole thing that they go through.
I think from that point, then, that what we want when someone comes in for a commercial farm is proof of application, and how often do you have to get it renewed?
Once a year.
Once a year. Then we'll simply make it a condition that you provide us with a copy of the renewal every year.
I had the same
Lucas.
thing with the rabbits, I had a USDA
Yeah,
permit,
Lucas.
twice a year inspections, once a year renewal.
Do you have to show acreage? I mean, a map or anything else to say that you have so much acreage or anything else as guidelines for it?
For the animals?
Just for your farm permit, for your permit?
Nope, what they do is they look at, condition of the animals.
No, if you don't have, if you're getting ready to stop, okay, you don't have animals yet, because otherwise you're putting the horse before the cart.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so that you know what you
Well,
can.
they suggest that you talk to an inspector before you get set up, so before you build your barn and all that, to make sure that what you plan to do falls under their guidelines. And they'll give you a copy of what they're gonna require, so you know how to build your barn, or how to house your cows, or.
But this should be giving them, if they're looking here, read it to turn on it, instead of just
But they
go.
don't, they don't ask you how many acres you have.
No, I'm just,
When we get down, when they come before the planning board, we can say, this is what you have to give us. You've given it out, the same way we do now when we submit something to DOT or to the Maine DEP, and we say, you have to give us a copy of the application and show us that you've submitted it. We can require them to show us the submission, and then
A
every
copy of the
year,
approval.
give us a copy of the approval, and every year give us a copy of the renewed permit, so that we have it in the records.
Oh, we'd also probably ask, what kind of animals are you gonna have?
Oh,
How
yeah.
many are you gonna have, you know? What's your plan? What is it, so it's your approval from,
But in terms of
A
the
sketch,
submission.
a sketch plan showing locations of boundaries and wells.
Yeah, we have to
yeah,
have
we
that.
have to know that stuff, so if it's, you know.
But
that's all stuff that we can work up.
But I don't think it would matter if we had what type of animals and how many, it wouldn't affect the planning board decision, because that's all provided by the US
Department of Agriculture would have already reviewed that. They
Oh,
don't
you
have a
still would
permit, then
probably
they
wanna know
don't
that,
come
because
before
there's
you.
some things in here that are limited.
I guess
or
have,
prohibited.
to have a list won't hurt.
They beyond, that are beyond
Yeah.
what, agriculture's not to cover everything.
Well,
They're
to have a
still
list
gonna
won't
have
hurt, but
certain
if they
things
said
that-
they're gonna have 400 head cattle, we can't object to that, because there's nothing in that standards thing.
Right.
As long as the Department of Agriculture,
As long as the Department of Ag says it's okay, then we're gonna say it's okay.
have that information.
It would be good to have, so
Yeah.
we can say, yeah.
And I have to think that, you know, while most farms probably wouldn't have to do it, I would have to think that there has to be, they must come look at the property, they've got to do something, because I can't envision they're gonna give you a permit if you have 1 acre for 500 head of cattle. So there has to be something there that triggers what they do.
I know,
I know,
We-
we can't
we
find
know
it in
from-
best management.
We know from talking to Wayne last year, that if they get 2 calls related to odor or
Unless it's due.
Or runoff,
or runoff,
yeah.
then, see,
But they didn't recognize that as a farm,
that's not a farm, that's why the Department of Ag wasn't on it, but they'll come down and they'll make you do the waste management plan. Or the nutrient management plan, sorry. They'll come down and say, you've gotta do this, and that's a very expensive,
It's a good thing, it keeps people
it's
from
not a bad thing.
making, smelling up the neighborhoods.
Okay, so then we look at the performance standards. Free-range animals confined to the owner's property.
but don't laugh.
I can't.
I watched chicken herd flock disappear slowly from across the street for a whole summer.
Pens
There was
housing,
another one.
pens that house.
How many windshields or how many radiators?
In excess of 5 adult swine shall be staggered at least 100 feet from a residence.
I don't need to tell you that I have a problem with that, because I think I don't know that that's necessary considering everything else. You know, if the USDA.
Because if the agriculture comes in and they
USDA is
get a
gonna-
smell complaint, you won't need it.
I think that's unnecessary.
Would it, would
I,
it protect
pasture
the,
and feeding is definitely not necessary, because we've already addressed that issue.
Right,
just wanna make sure we're gonna protect the abutting
The neighbor.
neighbors.
Right, but what he's saying is that the reason you would do this is because of the smell. But with the Department of Agriculture, if you get 2 citations for smell, it's gonna cost you a whole lot of money. So it's not gonna matter how far we put it, because you could put it 200 feet, and if it still smells, because they're not taking care of them the way, because pigs, normally when you take care of them, do not smell. It's when you don't take care of them properly that they're gonna smell.
Not excessively, anyway.
Right, and in those cases, if somebody complains to the Department of Agriculture, then they're gonna be doing a whole lot of more paperwork.
Yeah, but the other question is not particularly on animals, this is agriculture, okay? We know of instances where they try to be under agriculture and they still haven't paid fines or anything else.
Chip?
Yeah, I was just gonna comment that if someone has a pigsty, constructs a pigsty, commercial, we're talking about too, not a hobby farm. Just, I can't imagine how a 100-foot restriction is onerous from a residence.
Yeah.
It just.
We can leave it in there, we can have stricter standards, I don't know what their standards
A
are.
minimum of 5 acres, what's 100 feet? It's just, it's not much, and saying that you're gonna rely on, well, someone puts a pigsty right on the property line, and it's 98 feet from my house, I have to file a complaint with the Department of Agriculture, and maybe they do a nutrient management plan, but as Marty points out, it can take a while to get it in.
You got a freezer, don't you?
Huh?
You got a freezer, don't you?
Yeah. What's that got to do with the pig?
He's in the freezer.
Are you kosher? If not,
Smoke them up. Light them if you got them.
okay. Well, I think with the exception of C in here, pasture and feeding areas, because we've already addressed that in the chart on the designation criteria. I don't think we
Same
need
thing
to.
with D, grazing areas, what's the difference between feeding areas and grazing areas?
This deals with it being, with a wetland or a watercourse.
Okay,
I have to go back to B, I would object, in fact, I might vote down this whole thing at town meeting.
I'm gonna hit
If I
him with a
knew
stick.
there'd be a potential for, but there are, I about 40-acre parcel, and it could be 80 pigs on a farm back there within 100 feet of my, there's no way that smell won't be coming into my bedroom. But,
I can live with these staying there, I just thought it was unnecessary because of the USDA approach, but, you know, it's not, if that's not a big deal.
Not USDA, it's.
Or, no, I'm sorry, Maine.
I have no problem, I don't know what the standard that the Department of Ag has, and if this is more than the Department of Ag,
I don't care.
that's fine with me, I don't care if we have a stricter standard.
well, I was getting at maybe it should be more than 100 feet. That's from a residence, not from a property line necessarily. I could argue that it's from
We could make it from a
a
property
building.
line.
I could go along with the property line.
And I would also, right now it says in excess of 5, I would say if it contains 5 or more. Because right now it has to have 6 before that kicks in.
Yeah, I like 5 or more, and I like property line too.
5 is borderline, I'm thinking 20 to 80, that could be within 100 feet.
Oh, yeah,
That's where, remember, this, we're talking about R1, 2, and 3, where there are a lot of people invested in their properties because they knew it was a residential area.
I agree.
And to have, we will be allowing a pig farm in a residential area. Like, we'd be talking like 100 pigs could be next door to any one of us.
Make a motion, Tom.
I make a motion that, I'll make it extreme, that no more than 5 pigs should be allowed in any parcel within, 1, 2, or 3. That's my motion.
And that they should be 100 feet from the
No,
property
no,
line?
No, if there's only 3 or 4, then I'm all right with that. We can
So you'd be okay with 5 at 100 feet?
I can,
Okay.
is that what you said?
I don't,
I just
understand
said
it.
I said 5 or more.
Yeah.
He said he's gonna restrict it to
Yeah.
5, period.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Then
No
it's not
more.
a commercial farm. This is,
Well, no piggeries.
So
that's
be
for
it, no
sure.
pig
No
farm,
piggeries.
because we all,
Oh, yeah, we
we
all
all remember that
remember that
pig farm on Mountain Road. I didn't live near it, but I drove by it, and I couldn't imagine living right next door to that.
Right, but remember what I said, 2 complaints, and you've gotta do a whole bunch of paperwork. And,
Yeah,
But
but
they take
I'll
a-
throw out there've been other properties in town where there's been a history of decades of complaints, and there's still issues going on there.
That's true.
So sometimes a
there weren't
complaint
even any
doesn't
animals
resolve
there.
the problem.
Years ago.
So can you restate that, just so I
Okay,
make sure I have
so-
it correctly?
Let's see if I did say it correctly, that no more than
5 things.
5 pigs should be allowed within any of the R1, 2, or 3 zones.
What happened, Tom, let me just ask a question. Okay, we know we reduced it to 5 acres, okay? But what happens if you have more than 5 acres?
I'd be willing to entertain a different number than 5.
Well, no, I'm just asking a question.
I'm just answering.
Yeah,
So I'd be willing to entertain a different number than 5, but I think once you, I don't know what that magic number is when it stinks like shit, a pig farm. So, and I think, I'm trying to protect the whole town, not just my property. I think, again, in the town vote, would be people saying, I don't want a pig farm right next door to me with 80 pigs. And I think a lot of people would object to that. If one person brings it up,
Yeah.
might be me, then yeah, I think this whole thing would get voted down. Pigs are different, just like guinea fowl are different. They're different than the other. Cattle and I don't know, so rabbits, there's so many other things they can do, but pigs can really be a problem.
did you have a problem with the 60 pigs that John and I raised? Did you know we had them?
When was that?
Yes, not, it's a good answer.
I was only here when they had them.
I understand what you're saying, I respect your point of view, but I have a problem with the larger picture, which is prohibiting something from happening in town because once upon a time, somebody did it badly. You could have a person with a relatively large piece of land with a pig farm, managing it well, and you wouldn't know they were there.
But this, again, you're, especially in the R1, you're in a residential district.
Understood, and I'm not talking about putting these pigs on a small piece of, a small piece of land. I have no problem perhaps restricting the numbers depending upon the acreage, but I think that's part of what the Department of Agriculture is gonna be doing.
Well, and
But
I
I do have a problem with a blanket restriction that restrictive. Yeah.
It's all, well, why would we restrict, guinea fowl?
Well, I have
Because they're-
that question
because
too,
they're
but I
nuisance,
decided to leave
so-
that one alone, but I do know that there are two ways to raise animals. And there's a responsible way to raise animals and an irresponsible way to raise animals, and you can do that with any animal.
I understand that.
And
but
I understand the history of this town with pig farms,
It's not just this town, I think it's.
but this is the town for whom we are writing an ordinance. So I think we need to be very careful about how we approach this, not to punish people who haven't even done anything yet,
Well,
because
I'll
of
go
the
back to
behavior of those
the
who
fact
did.
that we're talking about a commercial farm, a commercial operation that is prohibited right now in the residential districts. And now all of a sudden to say, okay, you can have 80 pigs. You did a great job, yours. I never noticed, so. I'll give you credit, not John. But that doesn't mean everybody will be as responsible.
Good point.
Well, you hate to make the trigger that every time that you have to get 2 complaints, it would be nice to have some, structure that so that your only recourse isn't necessarily getting 2 complaints because you're having a problem, and then have to wait for the bureaucracy to catch up to you and get something done, if in fact that even happens.
But we could, the problem with that is that we could do that with everything. We could make our ordinances so restrictive that you can eat and sleep in your house and that's it. And you can't flush the toilet more than twice.
But that's not what anybody's really suggesting.
Well, I think it is though. I think that when you get to the point when
I
you
don't
say
think
that
it
no matter
is.
what piece of property you have in town, no matter how big it is, you can't have more than 5 pigs. I think that
But
you
you're-
could,
but
you
you
could
have
end
to-
up having it backfire the other way, and you could have
It
people who
seems
do
like-
have them
It seems
that say, I'm not gonna vote for this because you can only have
We're
5.
forgetting the fact that right now, there's none of this allowed. It's completely and absolutely banned in all these districts.
It might be, but it doesn't mean it's not happening.
And that's what we're trying to rectify here. But no one, as far as I know, no one has 80 pigs. And this says you can have 80
But
pigs
yeah.
100 feet from your house, from the neighbor's house.
And I tend to come down on Tom's side. This does not relate to any property anywhere in town. This relates to property in
And-
R1, R2, and R3.
And it's
Residential neighborhood.
It's also for
So I-
something that's not even here yet. This is someone new coming in. And it's not being that restricted. We allow cattle, horses, sheep, goats, red deer, alpaca, llamas, chickens, turkeys, geese. They're all allowed. That's not all that restrictive. We are restricting guinea fowl, male peacocks, fur bearers, and I say we restrict the swine as well. So I think it's not all that restrictive, and I bet you in town
None of us are
vote,
gonna be eaten pretty soon.
most people would probably say, yeah, that probably sounds like a good idea, to not allow 80 pigs next door in a residential district.
And I would say that if we're going to do that, that this table, 9362, has to have the line for swine and say 5 in total. 5 animals in the R1, 5 in the R2, and 5 in the R3.
Well, you kinda have that in R3 already, no more than 2 adults per acre not to exceed 6,
You're right.
which I thought
Oh,
was
so
overly
maybe,
restrictive.
So just do that across the board in R1 and R2.
where was that for, where did it, no, swine. So in the end, in excess of 6 means, there's only just, in excess of 5 means 6, it doesn't mean 80. Cause they can only have
Well,
6 total?
6 total, in that, based on the way that chart was set up.
6 total adults.
6 total.
I have no idea how many piglets you could end up with.
They're plentiful,
6 to 8.
But then piglets,
but
Depending on the
after a
size.
period of time,
Piglets make really
yeah,
good
but
piglets.
I mean, but you still, then you can go over your number. Or half,
I
half
know,
of
if
the,
that's
half of
true,
the
that's
piglets,
can't get
the
them to
piglets are usually
They're cute,
distributed.
it's worth a
Right.
smell.
Right. But you can easily get 80 pigs.
Yeah, you could,
but not full grown.
No, but that's 80 pigs.
So there you
It's-
are,
it's
there's
already-
your 80 pigs.
It's already allowed, according to that chart.
Well, in the
It's potential.
but it's also temporary.
Right.
It's a crystal ball,
Yeah.
shiny, well, unless it's
Because they
filthy.
could be piglets.
On,
Yeah.
But those are-
number,
but
no,
piglet-
pigs and
commercial
piglets,
basis,
so
commercial
say the
farming
piglets
is
can
some
only
piglets.
stay for X number of period of time. Only up to X number of pounds.
That, to me, that's acceptable, that's a whole different
Do you
thing.
think in a
than
commercial
200 pound.
operation, if someone's gonna have a pig farm, they're already gonna have in mind a best management operation, and it's not gonna be just a 3-sided rotten woody shed, which probably is what you have embedded in your mind?
Well, I don't think they'd be able to get away with it.
Well,
with
that's
the
that's
inspections.
what I mean. If it's a commercial operation, there are standards under which they already fall.
What about when they?
It's not what about, there are.
No, but right,
mean,
it is, what
you
about,
can-
we're saying, let's now start allowing this. Remember up in Turner, they had the chicken farm?
The egg farm. The
chicken-
Costa eggs.
The Costa, and it just destroyed the whole town. It was like decades of a problem up there. And I don't, and they have a lot more open space than we do here in Arundel. We're talking about allowing this in R1, R2, R3, when all of a sudden we have, whether it's well maintained or not, I think there would be, it would impact a lot of residents of this town. That-
So since it's a residential neighborhood,
Yeah, in the
Treat it-
R4,
treat it like fur bearers.
I have no
Yeah.
restriction.
treat them like fur bearers and ban them outright in all 3 of the residential districts.
No, I think,
I'm not saying.
I think this could be a double-edged sword. I
Yeah.
mean, you could end up with some people happy, but you could end up with a lot of people at town meeting not happy because they feel it's too restrictive.
Well, I wonder how many people are dying to have a pig farm in these districts. I get that there'd be some of the other types of animals. I'm just not hearing the big demand for a pig farm.
Then why restrict it? Why ban it?
Go back to why ban game fowl, because
Not the same, they're not the same.
it could be way worse. I can shut my window.
Well,
I like to
Right,
eat
right.
pigs,
Pigs
pigs are
are
food.
Someday.
Well, when they do.
Well, right now, we have a motion to restrict it to 5
No more than 5 pigs
No-
should be
no more
allowed
than
within
in any of
R1,
the,
R2, or R3 zones.
And- and-
Pretty much we left
and
the
you know,
already statement.
And so it wasn't a second, but, so it'll die, but, I was thinking of 5 adults, and I'm seeing, it does already say not to exceed for swine, 6 total, that means adults. so-
But we didn't leave that in there, see, that's the problem.
No.
Oh, I see, yeah.
yeah, we
But
put it out.
if you wanna make your motion that way, that's what we could do, since that's where it started.
Okay,
We could
I'll
make the
change
motion
my
to add
motion.
that line
To the
into
table.
the table.
okay, good, I'll withdraw my previous motion and change it and propose that
You know,
swine.
we could call the table, to make it easier on ourselves and Tad, we could just create a smaller table of prohibited or restricted species,
Yeah.
irrespective of ag standards.
And with the swine, might I make a suggestion, I mean, I know how you feel, and, you know, I wouldn't want I've had family that raised pigs, so I know the right way versus the wrong way. I do understand that not everybody does it the right way, but with the permitting that we're going to require from the Department of Agriculture, they're probably gonna have regular inspections. I don't really like restricting it, but if we're gonna restrict it, this is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see 5 in the 1 and maybe 10 adults in the 2 and the 3. That way we don't end up with hundreds of them,
She's-
You
but
can make a
She's
motion.
nicer than I am, I would've said nothing in the
Yeah.
1 and 5 in
Yeah,
R
that's
two and R
That's
three.
what I was
Yeah,
thinking,
the
nothing
one,
in the
I think
one.
that's
Nothing in the one.
Yeah.
Are you even gonna be able to be a commercial farm with 10
10?
pigs or something?
No, probably not.
No, you're not gonna be a piggery, that's for sure. You're gonna be doing something else, that's.
You could be doing it in combination with
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I mean, that'd
yeah,
probably
yeah,
be
you're
more for
pretty much
personal,
out of
unless
that.
you're doing.
You could do cows and chickens and pigs and.
Yeah.
Or the
Just
other way,
restrict it
the
to
other
5
way that
pigs.
you could restrict it is, and I don't have an issue if you don't wanna put any in R1. The other way you could restrict it is no more, say that like, no more than 2 adults per 2 acres. Or, and not leave it as a total. So it would be completely driven by the number of acres that they had versus saying you could only have 5 or you could only have 10.
Yeah, if someone has 40 acres, then they,
Not within 100 feet of your house.
yeah, that
Right.
as well.
And we
I think
leave the
that's what
100
set me off is within
So
100 feet.
100 feet from a residence or 100 feet from a property line? I
Right.
like
I
property
can, I
line.
can live from the property
Oh.
line.
I like a property line.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good suggestion.
Now, how many did you say per acre?
2 per, what, 2 per acre?
I would put, I can live with the 0, I can live with the 0 commercial
R1.
in R1. But in R2 and R3, no more than 2 adults per 2 acres.
1 adult per acre.
No, it has no more than 2 adults per, and I would, so it's like 1 adult per acre.
Yeah.
1 adult
Yeah.
per acre.
That gives them quite a place,
With no-
quite a bit to roam,
With no limit, so
with no limit.
Well,
if
no,
they have
if
80
you've got
acres, they can have
80 acres, you can have 80.
Donna,
pigs,
kick
right?
in, if you don't think it's right, kick it in. I'm just trying to come to a compromise.
Actually, that's better than.
I think that's actually a really good
Yeah.
Well,
suggestion.
no, I'm not arguing with that.
I do too.
The picture of 80 acres and then you have 80 pigs roaming around, that's not how you raise pigs.
Well, no, I'm just saying you would be allowed to
No, I
have,
understand what you're saying, but for clarification purposes, you know, pigs would be, sheltered
Yes.
at the very least, or completely confined and grain fed.
Yep.
In which case,
They're a lot
that's
better
good
tasting.
eating, yes. So, and if they're completely confined and grain fed, then you have a different manure removal system, that's again you wouldn't know they were there if you lived next door.
But at least the suggestion gives you some parameters.
yeah.
And it gives you a
Absolutely.
measurable, you can measure it in your head, you know, how many per acre, 1 per acre.
So somebody needs to put that into a motion format.
well, before I put it in a motion format, I need to make
And
sure
get
that,
numbers.
that it's, cause number one, I mean, my family raised pigs, but I wasn't there to take care of all, some of the kids. We were like slave labor, we were little kids. I just wanna make sure that 2 adults, or in this case, I just put it 1 adult per acre. So 1 adult per 1 acre, with no exceed, because your acreage will drive that. We'll change it 100 feet from the property line, so hopefully that will keep anything from smelling too close to anybody's property. So, with that, I'll make a motion that we add to the exclusion restricted table swine with 0 allowed in the R1 district. And in the R2 district, no more than 1 adult per 1 acre.
Just R2?
No, R2 and
And
R3.
R3.
Okay.
Yeah, R2 and
And
R3.
the setback is 100 feet from the property
Yeah,
line.
it's
Yeah.
even at that, okay, so I'll second that.
Okay,
And
motion has
I'll-
been made and seconded to amend the table, to add swine, and to amend the performance standards, section B, to be cited at least 100 feet from the property line instead of a residence.
Question,
Well, we have to
debate,
change that phrase.
Marty?
discussion. I would think if you were gonna do it, you would put 2 per acre, okay? Because at that time, 1 acre is square footage, okay? And there's a lot of square footage in, 1 acre, 44,000 square feet.
Yep.
Equals 1 acre. So, I mean, I would say 2 per acre. By that way, you have your acreage still judging.
Who seconded my motion?
I seconded it.
Can you withdraw it for 1 second? What I would
Depends on
like to
what you're
do
gonna
is,
do.
I wanna change the pens housing or containing. I don't care about the 5. I want any pens housing or containing adult swine to be 100 feet
Okay.
from the property line,
I will withdraw and, I'll second it, that's your new motion.
yes.
Actually,
Okay.
we just cancel that whole first phrase and just start with adult swine shall be sited at least 100 feet from property line.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's a good suggestion.
Great minds with you.
Unfortunately, we share it.
That's okay.
Any thought on my
You should have
comments?
something to share. Okay, any
Any
other
thought on my comments?
You would be doubling what we're talking about, doubling the amount of swine that be allowed. I think on a 40-acre parcel, 40 head, I think,
If you're commercially, that's not enough.
well, but right now, they're not allowed at all to be in that zone, so it's being a lot more.
Or you're going by acreage.
liberal.
You're still going by acreage.
So if they had 100 acres, they
We're
can
essentially
have 100.
assuring that there are no piggeries. You can have
In
pigs,
the
you can have
residential
a
district.
herd of
It's a
swine,
residential.
but you're going to have other animals in order to make that farm successful.
If you want a piggery, you belong in a different area.
Mhm.
Yep. You belong down in the,
Our
floor.
Yeah.
Not next.
next to Diane.
Yeah,
No, we're gonna put them,
you got one plan right there.
Well, no,
okay?
even the state says no, it's not a piggery.
Is there any other discussion?
No,
I
I think
don't know
that's,
what the motion is.
Yeah, let's
Alright,
do
so
it.
motion- all right.
Would you read it back?
I will, I think I have, is to amend the table, to reflect that 0 swine will be allowed in R1, 1 adult per acre in R2 and R3, and the
Per
language
acre.
under. Per acre.
4B.
And the language in 4B will state adult swine shall be sited at least 100 feet from property line.
Correct.
That's good.
Okay, any discussion, any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous.
No,
it's not
I'm sorry.
unanimous.
I'm abstaining.
She's gonna abstain, okay, Marty?
I'm opposing.
Okay,
I'm not abstaining, I'm
one
saying no.
abstention, one
1,
opposition.
2. So that's,
1, 2,
that's
3, 4,
5,
5.
1 and 1.
Is the signage okay? I do have. an
Okay,
issue
so
with
on
signage.
C, the pasture and feeding, we were gonna do 75 like the rest as long
Right.
as we can
Correct.
get the
I thought we were
documentation.
gonna take that
I
out.
thought, yeah, we take all that out.
Oh, we took C out
Yes.
We were taking that one out.
Standards are very,
and leaving D,
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
but
because
at
it
the,
re-
s-
it
at the
specifically
70,
relates
at
to
the
a wetland.
75,
No, 50.
No,
at the
50.
50?
And I'm gonna make a reference, and I should put in, and should observe setbacks of the shoreline zone. Because there are regulations the state of Maine, DEP
Oh,
has.
so this is shoreline,
Well,
oh,
that's just in general, but then the shoreline zone, they actually have some really stringent things about livestock crossing wetlands and water courses that are actually more stringent than an A. That's, if it's a shoreline zone.
so you're gonna add that to this?
Yeah, it's a warrant, it's basically a heads up kind of thing,
Okay,
rather than just, having to find out the hard way. Rather put it in here so they're alerted to the fact that if you're in the shoreline zone, a whole different set of standards of the shoreline zone.
Yeah, over.
Chip?
Just a technical point, it's a shoreline overlay district, not a zone, correct?
Well, the shoreline zone is three. You've got the RP zone, which is a shoreline zone, and then the SP, stream protection, is a set zone. But you're right, the shoreline overlay is an overlay zone. But they're all considered a shoreline zone.
Okay. So the only thing that I have in here, and maybe I'm reading this the wrong way, signage shall be limited to 16 square feet at any driveway entrance. So if I put a U-turn in my driveway and they're 20 feet apart, I can have 16 feet worth of sign on each one of those, because they're both entrances.
No,
Well, that's what that says.
I know what it says, but that's why, we pick at this stuff.
It should say at one driveway entrance.
At a single location.
One,
Per property.
one sign at a single location.
One sign at a single location. Good wording.
Are we really on page 4?
So you have to have something like grandfathering, you said.
What it would be, here's a question
All right,
about
we
the,
need to know how that's really gonna,
We need to-
what is it gonna say? Signage shall be limited to 16 square feet.
At a single
At a single
location.
At a
location.
single,
A single sign at a single location.
what's the size allowed for any other,
16 square feet.
Okay, signage shall be
16
limited
for-
to one 16 square foot
It depends on the areas that you're in for all of the other signs.
sign
DV1, DV2, both that all have
For-
at a single
for home
location.
occupancy, in,
Eight square feet.
No signage if you're a type 1.
Type 2 is what, 8 square feet?
8 square feet.
so why would we allow double that for
Because
this?
it's a commercial operation.
So what, they're in a residential zone.
And you wanna have a sign big enough for the pig to.
So they can read it,
No,
so you can teach them to
As he
read.
flies by, right?
I think,
All right,
Or-
we're
so-
already granting
all right,
a
so
lot that's not
signage shall be
allowed.
limited to one
8 square feet is pretty small.
16
But that's what's
square
all-
foot sign
every other
at,
type of
at
business in
at any single
R1,
location.
not
I don't know,
true.
that does, I think I
It's
missed
restricted
something
to 8.
somewhere.
Get rid of the word any.
You can have larger
At a
along
single
Route
location.
1 in the business zone, but
No,
the
we
rest
took
of the
that
town,
down.
you're restricted to 8 square feet. So why would a farm be different than?
It's a fun.
So what?
In
So
a
what?
residential, in a residential
So
district.
a contractor yard might say, but a contractor yard ain't
No,
big
but it's a
sign.
pond.
But
Farmers
why-
have-
Why,
Well, that way you can put your fly catchers on.
why a
easier.
farm and why are they allowed to have twice the amount of sign as any other?
Because we like them better than.
Oh, wait a minute, no, he's got a
That's the reason
point.
why, let's.
Wait, no, he has a
Let's
point.
modify that.
He
What-
does have a point.
What is the restriction for the biggest signs at businesses?
It's 8 square feet.
In the R1.
In the residential
In the
Residential.
zone,
residential zone.
it's 8 square feet.
Then,
Let's drop it
So
to
this should be
square.
eight
You're
square
right,
feet.
it should be
yeah,
8
then I
square
think it
feet.
should be
Yeah,
I
eight.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, now we're gonna get to a different animal, is when we turn the page. Like, okay, let's leave it that, we'll make it 8 square feet.
8 square
8 square feet.
Accessory conditional uses, hay rides, corn maze, petting zoos, and similar activities.
Yep.
Agritourism, lodging facilities exceeding 4 rooms but less than 15, and accessory to the farm operation. You could have a B&B on your farm, essentially.
Come see our pig.
Yeah, right? Veterinarian
Making
offices,
porks the right
Stop
way. You know, they really don't smell.
veterinarian offices that are associated with an active animal husbandry operation. A farrier.
A farrier, F-A.
Yep,
Yeah, I know.
I know you know.
But you didn't do it.
Word doesn't.
Farm retail operations and farm stands. And then log yards and firewood processing, subject to noise or, I think log yards should be treated the same way, contractor yards are treated, because that's what they are.
What is log yards doing
No.
under animal husbandry?
It's an accessory use to the farm, so that when you
Oh.
clear out all of your pasture land, you can do something with your firewood.
And so what are the restrictions normally?
You can't do it. No, there is none. But there probably will be eventually. Because it's something we haven't dealt with as long
Well, then
It's
if
an
we don't,
associated use.
so if we don't have
It's like
anything yet, then we
What?
kinda have to leave it the way it is, and then if we do come up with something, then we'll have to go amend this section.
So we can take that one out.
I was, if I may, kind of thinking that this whole list doesn't belong here.
Why not?
Right.
Well, I know, I understand all of these things need to be addressed,
Mhm.
but some of them, like hay rides and the corn maze, maybe some farm retail operations, farm stands, they would apply just as well to agricultural operations.
Mhm.
So they should be under the general heading of farming, not just animal husbandry.
But we're making that separation between agriculture and animal husbandry.
I understand that.
So, and we're
And
saying,
I think
But
that's a
I
good
don't-
reason to list them as an accessory use, so that we have a very clear split between farm and animal husbandry.
Because we don't have anything written up yet, we have to have something.
Yeah, we
We
got
do,
farm.
we do for the farm retail and the farm stands.
yes, we do.
We
Those
do
are
have-
existing things. So we could theoretically take that out.
G,
It's
take
just-
G out?
Well.
Yes,
No, he said they have farm stands already,
Right, we have-
yes, but I
farm
don't
stands.
think, I don't think
and
G
farm
belongs
retail
in there.
operations already.
G doesn't
So
belong
let's
in
not-
there.
Just
Let's
throwing
not
them in,
repeat
just
them.
throwing them in to remind people that these are some of the things that you can do on the farm.
Alright, so these don't get any explanation, this is simply a list?
This is the list right now. I threw it in there, it's been in there a long time, guys, we never got to it until
I
now.
understand.
And it's been there since January.
I was much
think.
younger when you put it in.
Absolutely.
We were all younger then.
But this is addressing that issue we addressed at the comp plan level, saying, we need agritourism, we need to give farms
And
an
if we leave the
opportunity.
farm retail and the farm stand, I would like some kind of reference back to the other part of
To
the
the
ordinance.
Okay.
Cause I don't want them to think that they would go with the Department of Agriculture's definition of farm retail or farm stand if
They
we
don't
have our
have
own.
Yeah,
I don't care, I want them to know they have to go back to ours.
okay.
And you're not gonna differentiate between accessory conditional uses for ag as opposed to, animal husbandry, right?
Remember that ag, right now, except in the R4 district, or the RC, assume the RC district, that animal husbandry is a conditional use in the residential districts. And it's never permitted in the business districts.
Mm.
So, how does that answer the question?
So the question perhaps is not asked correctly.
I thought I missed something.
Looking to have, just one section rather than having it, repeated in two different parts of the ordinance.
Well, then what you're talking about is agritourism, you're gonna have to have your own section on agritourism.
Yeah.
So why don't
Why
you
not?
call it agritourism?
Well, I think because,
Accessory uses, parentheses,
is it part of the issue, for me, part of the issue is because we don't have it written up yet.
Exactly.
This is ready to go out. If we don't address these
Yeah,
things,
if we take that out
then they're not,
completely.
then they're not allowed, because they're not referenced anywhere in the land use regulations. If we get to the point where we actually address this as a bigger section in the land use regulations, then you can go and remove these and reference them to the new ordinance. But we don't have this today. That's how I look at it, is we don't have that today.
but why not further define it as agritourism in parentheses, so people know why you have this list in the first place? And I'm not sure logging fits there, but okay.
I agree, I don't
It
think
should
logging
be,
come up.
and you're right, it should be just sale of firewood cut on the premises, cause actually a log yard, putting another operation in a farm, or in an animal husbandry, say, oh, well, okay, now we're gonna import logs, and we're gonna have another business,
Right.
which is log yard.
But this is just a one-time, type of function, they clear the land for use of.
Well, no,
No,
some,
no, no.
It can be ongoing.
yeah, some of them
But
Thin it
do
out.
we
can
want,
cut so many,
do we want that? Is that part of animal husbandry, or
You
ongoing?
gotta
Well,
have pasture.
Yeah.
well, it's
Yeah,
part
yeah.
of your property
Use of the land.
maintenance.
Yeah, but what
Look at
happens
Look at what
if,
Mark is doing out there.
It's part of land
But,
management.
well, maybe I worded that incorrectly, I said at one time, if they clear the land, and they do have to do something with the logs.
Right.
But once they're gone, it's kinda opened the door to
Well,
a
that's why we
recurring,
wanna take the log yard out.
Log yards out.
yeah.
You know,
Okay,
it could say firewood processing, wouldn't, I
Well,
don't know if
yeah, I
that
don't
would be.
think
Well,
wanna
you
say
could
that
put
either.
I would
fire-
take the
It's
entire
rare.
line.
You could put
I
firewood processing from from the farm property.
Well, do we need it at all though?
Well, look what Mark does. That's what Mark, he subsidizes part of what he does, I believe, because he's been cutting some of the trees on his property, and I believe he sells it.
But he's not bringing in new wood.
I don't
which-
believe he
which
is.
See, I
think
I
would
don't
just-
believe he is.
I would just take that entire line out.
Yeah,
Yeah, see, and I would leave it in, but I would change it, I would put firewood processing from the, from the farm property.
On-site timber.
Yeah,
on
on-site
Oh.
timber.
Good one.
okay.
Chip,
A respectful suggestion would be, trees are not animals, just leave it out of this for now.
That's what
Okay.
I'm thinking, yeah.
I can live with
It's
it
a
either way.
byproduct to the operation and,
and we can address the whole log yard issue at some other point.
Guys, also, and respectfully to Chip, also, you know, agritourism lodging facilities aren't animals either, although one would hope you don't get animals.
but that's something.
Well, if you're
that-
gonna have lodge,
That's something we've been encouraging, but I don't know if we're encouraging log yards.
No,
Well, and, yeah, and log yards is gone.
I-
But,
I-
I
it's
mean,
the whole
it's,
G out.
it's a farming equivalent of a dude ranch.
yes,
Logging?
No,
Animal husbandry.
no, the
The idea-
agricultural logging facilities.
I'm talking about, you were talking about,
B.
Well,
Hey.
this wasn't just agritourism, though. You notice there's several other things. Obviously, you have a farrier on site, is not, I mean, that could be agritourism, but usually they're not very.
Right, but
No.
we're still leaving it
We're not
under
trying-
we're not
accessory
turning this into
conditional
Over the
uses.
corner.
We're not
And
turning
I-
this into a country
This isn't
fair.
I don't have an
road.
issue with the rest of them, I would just take G out.
I would take E and F out, because they are referenced in other places already.
Well, the reason I would leave them there and put a reference to the land use regulation, so that they know that if they wanna do the
Okay.
farm
Yep,
retail
that has it
or the
also.
farm stands, that you have to go follow those rules, it's not just allowed.
Does anyone know what a farm stand, what the regulations for like a residential area, are you even allowed to have them?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
there's a,
So it's a permitted use?
it's already existing, yeah.
Okay,
You have to get a permit from the code enforcement officer.
I think we
The
should
farm
just take
stand,
it.
you have to, is a conditional use.
I think we should just leave five
Not
completely
farm
out.
stand, I'm sorry, farm retail.
retail, yeah,
Farm
okay.
retail.
I make a motion
What's the motion, Marty?
to take 5 completely out.
Motion has been made to delete 5 completely. Is there a second?
I'm gonna second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, see, and I have an issue with, the only reason I have an issue with taking 5 out is if we had another part in, I mean, aside from the farm retail operations of farm stands, if we had another area in the land use regulation that said that you were allowed to have these things, then I would be fine with it. But since that part of the regulations aren't written yet, I want people to understand that along with doing commercial animals, that they are allowed to do these things as well.
And I would agree, it's not written anywhere else, and so it's a good idea. Remember, it is an omitted uses ordinance.
If it's
so-
not there, they can't do it.
so do you wanna call it a suggested list?
No.
Are you open to
There's no
suggestions?
There's no suggestions.
No, they're
Okay,
conditional
no, I'm just
uses.
asking, you know,
No, I understand
not
that.
limited to, I mean, somebody may come up with another idea that you haven't listed here.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they will too,
And we'll end up at a town meeting.
you know it.
If we did not put this in now, would this adversely impact anyone in town that we are aware of at this moment?
I don't know, Mark might have some plans.
Well,
I've been talking
but
to him about that.
he's not doing it yet.
You can't do it yet, but.
Okay. Is there any, because see, my major problem with this is this does not seem to me to fit exclusively under animal husbandry. It fits under farming as the broad heading.
Yeah.
Both agricultural and animal husbandry. because you could have an agricultural operation and do hay rides and a corn maze, for
Absolutely.
example.
Yep.
So this seems to me to be a more generic mix of things.
Yep.
And I
It's-
would love
It's a
to,
stopgap.
I would love to address them, but address them later, as opposed to as part of this document where I don't think it belongs.
Well, it wouldn't belong in agriculture either, but I
But
would
make
like to.
make it a just
Well,
as farm
let's-
stands and farm
We
retail.
got the place till 10, let's do an we'll do a performance standards for
Stop it.
agri. We can't do it, come on, we're cooking till.
But I, Donna, I understand where you're coming from, and I think you're right. I think we do need to have
Yeah.
a section that addresses this under, for all of them, whether they're family, commercial, agriculture. I think these things need to be addressed. The problem that I have is if we're gonna bother to do this, let's give them every opportunity to be able to make money and to be able to actually farm.
Well, the two items in here that I think absolutely should be here are the vet's offices and the farrier. If you're raising horses, you need a farrier on site almost all the time.
If you're raising what?
Horses.
Oh, yes.
You need to have that fellow out there with his horseshoes.
You already have
And-
that question.
And if you've got animals, you know, the vet's office is a good idea. The farrier would be great because you could have the farrier working at your place and all of the other people that have small farms could bring their horses over.
Yeah, and under B, I don't see that in one, I only see it in 2 and 3.
The agritourism,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I only see that in 2 and 3, I don't see that in 1. Because I don't think we allowed a lot of that in 1.
All right, so
Under this
let's-
question,
let's-
We do allow B&Bs in one, remember?
Oh, we did,
Yeah.
okay.
So you have to get a permit for all these? This is conditional use, or are we saying permitted use?
No, they're conditional.
They're conditional. And the reason why they're conditional, Marty, is probably just on the hay rides and the corn mazes, basically.
They're
Where are you
gonna
gonna
get a
park these
permit.
people? You know, where are you gonna park these people? How are you gonna advertise this, you know?
Yeah, but I don't want this to become a country fair. I mean, you're petting zoos and everything else.
Why
Why
not?
not?
It's in the
Oh, then you're
residential
gonna have your mass ordinance, mass gathering ordinance.
Well,
I think
the-
Are you objecting to this because it's in the residential district and it belongs in the R4 district, is that what you're saying?
I think
would,
even some of
because
these
The
can be
hay
done.
rides, corn maze, yeah, those probably belong in the R4 and not in the
Yeah.
residential
That's
district.
bringing
The
traffic
agri- the
and noise.
The bed and
and-
breakfast aspect of the agritourism, yeah,
I'm going over the dark side.
we
About
put
time.
that.
Cause there is we want to allow the animal husbandry and the agriculture, but that doesn't involve traffic and noise and events going on.
It
Like,
involves noise.
well,
That's
not
not-
traffic, you know,
Yeah,
cars
it's not
coming
gonna
in
be
for,
as
for
much.
hay rides and stuff like that, I think that's something different.
Well, it would also be a very seasonal thing,
I guess it would be.
you know, it's not a constant thing.
Or the haunted hay rides at 10 o'clock at night outside your door would be a lot of fun, don't you think?
We can regulate those.
You can put a time.
Out of existence,
Okay.
right?
Put a time frame on it.
No, we're
And make
being
sure that they don't
restricted
go up
again.
or down hills on tractors that people haven't
No, the place
qualified
in
to
Gorham
drive.
did them
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but
forever
they-
and
but-
ever and ever and ever.
Yeah, but they turn on it.
Because that wasn't in a residential district, that was out of a
Right.
particular area.
No, but
Well, actually, that
The-
is residential.
it was residential because
For
it's
the
all,
house.
it's all houses going up the road. The problem is that they owned a big enough piece at the end that by the time you drove in, nobody knew you were there. And everything's inside the property. You could, I mean, it was like you thought you were in the sticks, except for the fact that when you drove in, it was all houses. It's all housing developments all going in.
Okay, so what did we decide?
Yeah,
Well, right now, the motion is to eliminate
Yep.
number 5.
that's correct. And we have a second, so we need to vote.
I'd like to make one other little suggestion though. In A, it strikes me as an odd mix. Hay rides, corn maze, fine. Petting zoo and similar activities should be a separate item on the list.
Maybe we'll get to that, shall we get rid of
Let's
5?
deal
and we'll
with
get
whether or
to
not we're
topics?
going to eliminate 5. Is there any other discussion about the elimination of 5? hearing.
Yeah,
Oh,
let me
go ahead.
just point out that we have to go realize that we already discussed that if it's not included, it is an omitted
That's correct.
use, so.
Right.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion to eliminate section 5, say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed,
Aye.
motion fails. 6 to 1.
All right, I'll make a separate motion then. I think I would move that we approve 5
You did vote for that.
revised to set out petting zoos and similar activities in place of subparagraph G, which was otherwise stricken.
Was it stricken or was it edited?
It was stricken. Log yards and firewood processing?
Yeah.
Right.
Was that it? I thought it was the opposite. I thought Marty wanted to strike it.
No, well, that,
I wanted to eliminate.
Well,
Is that part of your motion
my-
anyway,
yep,
so-
my motion is,
Oh, I'm
my
sorry.
motion is, we approve 5, revised as follows. We strike log yards and firewood processing from G and instead set apart the Donna's suggestion as to putting
Okay.
petting zoos and similar activities as G.
Is there a second?
With
I'll
the
second
addition
that.
of reference to the land use regulations to the farm, retail, and farm stands. Because we already have land use regulations
Understood.
for
Yep.
those.
That's fine.
I'll second that.
too.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that?
Yes. Why do you need to turn and have a conditional use for a farrier? Because a farrier is a business person, okay?
Yeah.
Why does he need a license just to be a farrier?
This is not for a farrier to come onto the property, this is for a farrier to come on and set up shop on the property as part of the farm. Not one that would be coming in and chewing the horses and going away.
Well,
This is-
a ferry, the old fashioned farriers, okay? He was an ironsmith and he would make the horseshoes,
Yep.
okay? But they still, I don't think why you need a license, he has to be licensed. A veterinarian, you don't see a vet stays at a farm, we don't have farms that big that he can stay there all the time.
No, he's not saying they're staying there all the time,
office.
associated
Well,
with,
this is a veterinarian office associated with, so
Yes.
yeah, it would be,
right, but he's gonna see other, he's probably gonna be
Right,
seeing other
which is the
animals.
same thing with the ferry. They might be seeing other animals,
Might
which
be a
is,
good point, because at what point is it associated or accessory if others are coming, for that particular business on site? Same with the vet, a vet setting up shop, have to be a really big farm in order for that to be self-sufficient without business coming in from outside.
Oh, business would be coming in.
And that's good.
Farrier would be on the road. He'll come back and fashion stuff back at his forge, but he's gonna go shoot the horses where they are.
Doesn't matter, like, what about the bookkeeper? You know, they'll be, might be coming and going too.
Right.
So it is just part of the operation.
Right.
Well,
That's what I mean, it's associated with it, but the vet would be importing people, just like the hayrides would be importing.
Well, any vet that turn around and works with large animals,
Well, he's gonna be
Probably
export.
going to
right, he would be going to them. So I mean, you aren't gonna bring your pigs to the vet office, okay, unless he's your pet. You have to still call the vet hospital to have them come out. You aren't gonna, and
Which brings up an interesting question, I mean, do we wanna limit it, because somebody could say, okay, I wanna set up a dog, basically, doesn't specify what kind of animals I'm servicing.
Well, no, because this says associated with an active animal husbandry operation.
yeah, dog kennel isn't,
But
It's,
that
that's
doesn't
not,
fall
a-
within
that
animal
doesn't,
husbandry.
that doesn't fall within animal husbandry.
Because it's a domesticated animal.
Well,
And, well,
what's
it means they're-
associated mean
it's-
though?
I'm sorry, no, I'm done.
I think affiliated would be a better word than associated.
But even affiliated, I could do some business with them, I'm affiliated, but 90% might be people from outside coming in.
And that's why you have a planning board,
Can I make a comment?
to sit there and go.
How about as part of an active animal husbandry operation?
Hang on, I think we have a
I have a
suggestion.
large animal vet, and, they are associated with large animals because of the equipment they use. They are not set up to take care of small animals. That's the difference between being associated with an animal husbandry operation. Although, and the same with farriers, the farriers that I know have a forge on their truck.
Yeah.
They don't take whatever work they have back to wherever they're going. They don't have time to do any wrought iron work, that's not the kind of smithing that they're doing. If you've got a good farrier coming into longer days now, they're all very busy. I don't know anybody that puts their horses in a trailer and takes them to the farrier, because if you've got a commercial operation where you've got 12 horses that need to be done, you are not putting them on a trailer to ferry them to the farrier. The farrier,
How much I know about that
the
stuff.
farrier is coming to you, you're gonna spend the day there, possibly 2 days there, because there's always something else going on. So, I was waiting for that one to be struck. I would, for what it's worth, my opinion would be to take that out, because that's not even that's gonna make everybody look stupid.
So they don't, you
didn't
don't
do that when I
envision them
did my-
ever having their own animals?
Obviously not doing
They're
it.
all just independent of the
We know
animals?
how to do that.
I still have a question.
I don't
Well,
know.
I guess one of the things about the farriers, I wanna make sure that we don't end up with, say you are a farrier by trade, but you also have your own farm.
Well, that shouldn't be a problem.
Right, and that's why I
People are-
saw it here, was
People
because
are
I
not
thought,
bringing their, I'm not
oh
gonna
no,
take
I'm
my
not
horses.
envisioning them bringing them
Yeah.
there.
Most farriers are mobile.
They're, they're,
Yeah, I know.
And so how about veterinary services, would that be the
they all,
same?
$75 for a barn call.
Right, and most of them
Yep,
are mobile
they
for
are.
large
Most of them
animals.
are mobile.
And, and they've got computers and printers in the back seat of their car, you just wait a few minutes and they'll print out your bill.
Chip
Everything is right there.
And they also can take your images or anything else, so
They
they,
have portable x-ray machines
Right.
with them,
And your credit card.
and you,
Oh, yes.
that's right, oh, yes,
it's
yes.
not cash
Yeah.
always.
I know.
Would be
So-
nice.
It's it would have to be, in most places that do animal I'm sorry, I'm not taking.
No,
I'm just keeping track of the time, that's all.
The animal husbandry operation, if you were talking about a breeding facility, you're not gonna do it on 10 acres, you're not gonna do it on 5 acres, you're not gonna do it in a residential. That's not, I mean, that's, now you're in the weeds, cause that's just not gonna happen here.
Okay.
Any animal husbandry that's a breeding facility, you're talking a lot more land than 10 acres,
Okay.
so.
Chip,
Would a veterinary facility be a conditional use in any of the residential districts under other regulations? If they didn't have if there were not a farm?
I don't think so.
And would you want them to be? And then I would just make the observation that finding a large animal vet or a farrier is a challenge. There aren't many people, and the guy we use covers Maine, New Hampshire, and part of Massachusetts.
Lost trade.
Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, he retired last year. He got tired of getting kicked. Can't imagine after 40 years you get tired of being kicked. I think you get used to it by now.
That's right, we all still come here.
That's right.
Or you go to town meetings.
Touche, daughter.
Now, it's not the minute. It's not a residential one, two.
Then,
Then that
You-
makes that very
Take
easy,
it out.
doesn't it?
yeah, take it out.
Okay.
See
I'll
here,
amend,
Don?
so, we have a motion on the floor, so we just amend that motion to strike D and G.
What,
Right.
why would we do
It's C.
that?
C.
Just
C.
seriously, you think about this, I mean, wouldn't a large animal vet be better? I mean, wouldn't it be a good idea if we're gonna have them, to have them on the farm than?
But we just heard that they're going to come to the farm
Well, I
with their.
understand that, but they're
not
gonna
gonna
have,
set up.
they're gonna set up somewhere, they're gonna have an office somewhere.
No, a lot of
No.
them don't
No,
have
they
any
don't anymore.
offices. They're completely mobile, they have vans
For
and,
some of them, they
Well, I
work
understand.
out
know,
small
they-
animals.
because nobody drags their animals.
Calls.
You know why? Because their animals get hurt when you take them from one place.
I know,
They may
Especially
get
your
hurt, you
horses.
can't transport them.
Tad, it's a home occupation.
thank you.
Yeah, I suppose it would be, except for the farrier, because he's not making those hushes in a home occupation.
No, he's got a whole a shoe store in the back of his truck.
Right, and he's got a
Yep.
whip it.
Okay, so are we gonna take
Oh, we
C
gotta
out,
stop while
or are
we're
we
ahead.
gonna leave C in?
Run in.
I think we should take C and D out,
C and D out,
and G.
C, D, G out.
C, D, G out, yep.
Okay, you wanna redo your,
Why would we take
motion?
G out again?
Because we took the
Log
log
yards.
we're not doing logging
Why
yards.
is it, the firewood processing from on-site timber? Can't do it if we don't say it.
It's these,
Because he's what?
well, you can't cut wood on your own property?
That's what I'm saying, that's why we put it in.
I mean, you can't, you're telling somebody what they can do with their property.
Just say wood, because maybe you're not using it for firewood.
So how are we gonna,
Sawmilling.
how are we
Yeah,
gonna
the
word
sawmill.
G now?
Yeah, sure.
Can you please repeat how we're gonna word G?
Wood processing,
Wood processing,
subject,
yeah.
from on-site timber subject to noise ordinance restrictions.
Wood
Say that again,
processing.
wood processing,
From
Oh.
on-site
On-site
timber.
timber, subject to noise, and I say that in there because that's something
Subject to the noise ordinance.
yes, which is, can be restricted, so you should know that.
Okay.
Yep.
As we know.
Okay.
alright, so do we wanna take away our motion and redo our, do
Redo
we
it.
wanna take away our second and do our motion again, or?
Yeah.
All right.
probably.
Or just
So
amended,
it's
All right,
G,
I'll,
and now that's
I'll,
all.
Before you jump into this again, I just have a question. The lodging facilities exceeding 4 rooms less than 50, is that automatically linked to agritourism? Or should that be a separate item?
I think it should be linked to agritourism,
Okay,
okay, otherwise, you know, Holiday Inn puts it in the middle of it.
okay, I wondered why it was there, okay. Got it.
Are we withdrawing the motion as?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll withdraw it as made.
and we'll start all over.
who made it second?
Just.
I think the second has to withdraw first.
I will withdraw my second to the previous motion, which I no longer remember.
Which is a good reason to withdraw. Okay.
Are we restating?
Yeah.
I'm just. I know.
No, it's.
You
it's
might
important.
wanna buy the
I've
gallon.
lost track.
What?
Do you buy wine out by the gallon?
No, I generally,
called-
for these meetings, I sit until you guys kind of figure something out,
Yeah, probably a wise thing.
and then I start writing. Did I miss anything?
No.
You missed all the interesting stuff.
Just to withdraw the motion.
Yeah.
Yes, so the
Withdraw-
second's been
just to
withdrawn and the
reword.
first has been
Okay.
withdrawn.
So we're looking for a new motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. I move that we approve the accessory conditional uses set out in paragraph 5, revised so as to set apart as a separate subparagraph petting zoos and similar activities, to otherwise approve 5A and 5B and 5E and F to be as prescribed in the separate section, and as well as G, revising that such that it sets forth wood processing from on-site timber, subject to the noise ordinance. And that we strike C and D.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any more discussion?
I like that.
Move.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It is unanimous. Now-
Dinner time.
Now, if I could have a motion to send this entire thing as amended to the planning board so that we can schedule a public hearing.
So
I
moved.
so move, yep,
Motion
I'll
has been
second
made
it.
and seconded to send this to the planning board.
You wanna make, you wanna, and you wanna make a motion since we have
Commercial
a quorum
animal
here for
husbandry.
planning board to approve it?
Donna made the motion, Yen seconded.
Not on the agenda. You have to-
You can't do
Okay.
it, you can't do it, it's not on the agenda, you can't.
We appreciate your efficiency, Marty, but,
All
The other
those,
thing is-
It's already on the agenda. for
Right,
all
the other
those
thing
in
is, I
favor.
wanted to see all the language
all
before.
those in favor of the motion?
I,
aye,
Which
Anybody
one?
opposed?
To
It's
send
going
this
to the
document
planning
as
board.
revised to
yeah.
the planning board.
It will be on the agenda next week.
Dinner time?
It'll be on the agenda. We're gonna-
Dinner time?
Yeah, we talked.
I
Right, right, you don't have that.
I fed the kid, but I haven't eaten.
We're gonna try.
We have to.
Yeah.
Motion for dinner time?
You want me to, I put
Yeah,
that
motion
pamphlet
to adjourn?
that was-
Yeah.
Everybody
I'll
wants
second
to look
that.
at it ahead of time.
I'll vote on that. The issue I have with the pamphlet is that it doesn't matter how it gets sent out to everybody.
No, it's
We
not.
have to go through and get over the wording.
But I also included recommendations, well, I'll send it for next
Yeah,
week.
for next meeting.
No problem.
Would you do me a favor and send it to me? So I can.
Make a motion, somebody make a motion.
Yeah, it's already been.
I was like, whoa,
I'll
I thought we
second
just,
it.
I thought we just
Okay.
finished this.
It'll be
All those in favor?
more
Aye.
confusing. That way.
Done.